And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. Today's going to be a little bit different of a video than we normally do on this channel. I'm sure we will talk about Pokemon a little bit, but on today's video, we're going to do a much broader type conversation. We're going to talk about a lot of different TCGs. We're going to talk about sports, dead TCGs, Pokemon, you name it. We're going to talk about it all. But with that said, if you see the two people on the screen right now, I'm sure almost 100% of you guys know who Jake is from Pokenomics. Link to his channel will be down in the description below. And then the other person on the screen is JT. If you guys remember, about 6 months back, I did an interview with a former sports card executive. That was him, JT. He used to work at Upper Deck. But JT, I know you were on about 6 months ago, but for anybody out there who might just be meeting you for the first time, feel free to just take like a minute or two and give everybody your quick backstory.
Yeah, how you guys doing? Hope everyone's having a good night. Yeah, I'm JT, a childhood friend of John. We grew up collecting cards together, and somewhere along the lines, it turned into a career for me. I spent a little over 5 years working at Upper Deck as a product manager. I put out a ton of hockey products, but I worked on a lot of cool other licenses, Marvel, Disney, worked on the NBA stuff a little bit. So I've had a unbelievable experience. Saw the underbelly of the beast in the trading card world. Been to a ton of national conventions, been to coin conventions, been to every convention you could imagine. So I just seen a lot of cool stuff, collected a lot of cool stuff, and I love talking about it. So happy to be on the show again.
Awesome, man. And Jake, what's been up with you? Anything new in the world of TCGs for you?
I've been collecting quite a bit of Star Wars. I'm trying to learn more about the Star Wars tops market. About a year ago, I was buying some like the 1977, like the vintage, the first sets, but I didn't really get into like the modern serialized stuff. And I've been sort of getting into that starting about 6 months ago or 7 months ago. So that's been like, I guess my new obsession. And then I'm trying to put together very slowly. I'm trying to put together an alpha set very, very slowly from Magic the Gathering. And very slowly I'm putting together a Hall of Fame basketball sports card. Every one of their rookies authentic autographed.
Oh, wow.
And that's again, very slow. Some of them I went very quick on a lot of the cheaper ones because there's a lot that it is not that expensive, and definitely like modern players not going to be that expensive because I don't have to get their like most expensive, rookie sign card unless they're, a very very top player. A lot of those cards you can get for $100. You can get a rookie autograph card. Players like Shaq or Kevin Garnett and sort of people from that era where their rookies were extremely common. But the ones from like Bill Russell, rookie autograph card, just the card itself in any sort of decent condition is, multiple thousands of dollars. And then, getting the rookie authentic on it, I don't know, 20 grand to get a good one, probably.
That's where you go to like signings. Actually the national convention coming up in about a month. Dr. J is going to be there. Paul Pierce, ton of good basketball guys. So you pick up one of their, unsigned raw rookie cards and then pay a couple $100, whoever, whatever the price range is. Go meet them too.
Yeah, particularly if the person's still alive. A lot of the people I'm going after are not alive. but yeah, something like Bill Russell, although I know he hasn't signed a lot historically, and so his signature is like worth quite a bit of money. Like he's someone who may sign more, and you might have insight into like, and into some of that, or like who tends to sign, how they get those sort of people. But that's a very interesting part of the market is signatures and something that does exist. Most of the people who watch this channel are like into Pokemon. Would be very, very sure of that. And like we obviously we like artist signatures, and there's some of that, but very different for the sports card market, where it's really the pretty much the central piece of that market, and all the value, particularly in the modern stuff.
Are you going to National, JT?
Oh yeah, I'll be there full force.
And Jake, I think you mentioned you might be down there too, right? Or you're considering it?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for 1 day of it at least. So so I'll be there. I've never been before, so I'm looking forward to just kind of. I've heard it's, it's massive, and this will probably be the biggest one ever, so it'll be I'm sure it'll be cool, be fun.
Yeah, they're massive. I mean, it's cool, definitely awesome. You're going down and check it out for a day, but it's a day is not enough. You're lucky to get a third of the convention. There's so much space to cover and so much just so much to see. And it was actually really cool. I noticed it at last year's national, and even to probably the handful of medium-sized shows I've been to this year leading up to this year's national. I definitely see an increase in the presence of Pokemon and the presence of just anything that's not sports. All the stuff you're talking about, oddball, movie sets, and obviously Star Wars, but a ton of other entertainment licenses are really coming into focus. And actually, I think Fanatics is Zero Cool. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that new card company, but Josh Luber started Zero Cool, and that's going to be their primary focus is, kind of entertainment-based, movie-based projects. And, that might spark some interest for some of you guys for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of Zero Cool, but I do want to go back a little bit because Jake, you talked about Star Wars, and I have very little bit of Star Wars sealed product. I actually have to look at what I have. I have 1993 Topps Galaxy Series 1 because it was just super cheap on eBay at one point. So I picked up a booster box of it, and I thought it was pretty cool because it had a photo of Darth Vader on the booster box, but I don't know a ton of it. Now, I remember who opened a bunch of Star Wars. I want to say it was Pokemon Radar opened up a couple. I think it was like 2021 Star Wars, but it's like one card per box, and they were signed cards. So what Star Wars products are you going after? Because you mentioned 1977, but that's super niche. Are you picking up super modern stuff? Or are you going in like the 90s, like that heavily printed era?
So a few months ago, I was buying up a lot of like the 2021 Galaxy set, which is sort of like the really popular, probably the most popular set at the moment, because of the artwork. Now, a lot of the art is actually from a 2018 set, which I don't hear the people who are talking really positively about like the investability in it, but it adds a lot of like cool refractor patterns. There's new art in it. It has like the super refractors. He's one of one with the gold texture. The great curator did a deal, and there were a few guys involved. I think the card went from like $500 to a $2,000 sale to like an $8,000 sale to like an $18,000 sale in the matter of a few weeks. The card that they feel is the best card from the set.
And what card is that?
It's called the Kurosawa, like I forget. It's the Kurosawa style, so it's like the Japanese style. There's a lot of different Jedi on it, sort of in this pose.
Okay.
And like this, and specifically the one that went for so much is the super refractor, which for those who don't know is a one of one version. So just like in sports, these sets have parallels. So there's a base card of every art. So, and then you have different parallel versions, which have the same art, the same character, and the same position on it, but has a different background, sometimes a different pattern, like holographic refractor pattern, like in this set, for each card. Sometimes it doesn't have that, and just has like a different color, some differentiation. And those cards are all serialized. So the base card is not numbered, but the other cards are not all of them. You can have you could have one parallel that isn't serialized, but it's just a little bit rare. A lot of sets have that, but then you'll have like in a lot of Star Wars, you'll have, not in that set, but in like Masterwork, Topps Finest, like the 2018 set, Masterwork 2021, from 2015 to 2020. Those are some of 2021. Those are some of the most popular, biggest sets. And in those sets, they have like blue parallels, which are unnumbered, but then they have like green. It changes from year to year, the colors, you have to be careful, but you know, you've got green, you've got purple, green 1 to 99 generally, purple 1 to 50, orange 1 to 10, red 1 to 25, and then gold super refractors, gold 1 of 1s.
So is it the modern stuff is the most valuable, very similar to what we're seeing with a lot of these TCGs?
So in very high grade, so because the 1977 stuff is not rare at all, particularly, it's not that valuable. I mean, the Luke Skywalker, which is like the #1 card, often with old vintage cards, the sort of key like personality cards are the most valuable, particularly if they're like the #1 in the set. Often the #1 has more value. The first appearance, even though Luke is in many, many cards, it's sort of like the Luke Skywalker card is the card called Luke Skywalker, which is the first one. That in high grade is quite expensive now. It's gone up a huge amount in the last, what hasn't in the last year, year and a half since I started looking at it, quite a bit ago. Similar to sort of like the Topps 1966 Batman, 1940 like Gum Ink Superman. A lot of these things have seen a similar sort of growth in sort of the non-sports card world. These first appearances of like key IP, important characters. But if you get, in like a PSA 9 in very high grade, it's quite difficult to find that card in very high grade. The sealed packs are very expensive. In those high grade, I'm not sure what it's going for, but multiple thousands. Number of thousands. Whereas if you get it in a 4, it might only be, don't quote me on this, but might only be $100 or a couple $100 or even less.
Yeah, I actually while at Upper Deck, we also kept an eye on competitor product, and we would open some stuff as a group and see what the quality control looked like on it, see how the sets were being put together, how they used their properties, all that stuff. And I remember opening a bunch of Star Wars, and obviously Topps, they just leaned on their brands and their technology. Like Jake was talking about, obviously they have their Topps Chrome, their Topps Finest. Those are pretty strong brands to be able to put whatever content you want to on it, and it's gonna drive some value to it. And I remember some of the stuff. I think Masterworks had some really, really awesome sketches in it. I know there's been some pretty wild autograph cards that come out of that, some duels of, Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. And just there's some crazy stuff in there. But what I also found interesting is how they had, you have multiple different licenses within the whole Star Wars universe. So you have all the movies, which are like live, the live human action movies. And then you had a bunch of the cartoons that were voiced over and stuff. And I wasn't as big of a fan when they meshed those two worlds and made kind of a collective product out of it. I was more in favor of the movie stuff, but I mean, everyone's got their, their thing. So that was just my perception of the product. But again, when they use those really nice brands, Masterworks was beautiful. Topps Chrome is always a quality product. Cards looked great.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You were talking about like the #1 cards in the set are sometimes like the most expensive, Jake. And I think I've actually heard you talk about the 1966 Batman cards before. And I've only ever heard you talk about them. And I have a couple, and the #1 is the most expensive card, like the Batman in that one too. So that's pretty funny that you say that.
We actually kind of we saw that trend a lot with Marvel stuff too. A lot like the appearances on comic books, where it would be the first appearance of a character. It was kind of the first, kind of insert set that a particular character appeared in for some of our content. Definitely drew value to that set versus subsequent inserts or card sets after that.
So speaking of big sales lately, I know one of the cards you own like I guess you could just tell everybody out there, if you're okay with sharing it, is you have a pretty big rookie card that recently sold at auction, and you have a very similar card.
Yeah, so it's the summer of Stephen Curry. He plays for the Golden State Warriors. He just won the NBA championship. He just got the Finals MVP, and he has a very valuable rookie card. It's the 2009 National Treasures patch autographed rookie card, and I do own a copy of it, Gem Mint 9, BGS graded. And a similar copy, yeah, it just sold recently at auction for 720,000.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And to be honest, like, I don't want to sound like a complete jerk, but it was actually a bit lower than I thought it was gonna sell for. Thought we were gonna see a bit higher value on it, but it's all right. It's still, I mean, so the story on the card, which makes it all the better, is back in 2010, 2009, 2010, my father and I went to the national convention, and it was the first year that Panini was manufacturing products, and we bought a case of National Treasures basketball. And Panini was running a promotion where, you bring your purchased items to their booth and you unbox it in front of them, and they will give you a raffle ticket for a prize. We didn't know what the prizes were. So my dad draws the number one raffle ticket, and he gets a ball signed by the entire draft class, including Stephen Curry, which is pretty wild. So then we opened up our case, and among the cards was a Stephen Curry autograph rookie patch. Excuse me. Sometime later, I think a couple years later, 2-3 years later, I just held it and then got it graded, and sitting on it ever since. And another cool little tidbit to that story is, so we have the ball signed by the whole draft class. We have the card. I kept all the original tobacco cigar style boxes that the packs came in, and I sent them off to a private signing with Steph Curry. So I will have the original packaging with the card and the ball, which it's a pretty cool combo.
No, that's awesome. No, I mean, especially the fact that you have that memory with your dad and you ended up pulling a card, and you had told me this story in the past, and you said that you tried selling, you had that card for sale at one point for $900. True or false?
True. I had, I was young, man. I was early 20s, and the card market wasn't what it is right now. Excuse me. And I went to a show one day, and I threw it in the case with a bunch of other cards, and I had like a $900 price tag on it. And I remember somebody came up and offered me $500, and I said, "Nah, I think I'm gonna keep it for that." Man, I thank everything in the universe that told me to keep it that day, because I would still be kicking myself.
Yeah, no, that's pretty wild. But so this is what I want to kind of ask a question for both of you. Now, we're seeing the overall market, and you kind of mentioned that Stephen Curry just won the NBA championship. You were expecting that card to go a little bit higher than maybe it did, even though I'm going to guess that was probably an all-time sale for that card, because I remember talking to you about that card in the past, and you were showing me sales for a lot less. But what's your guys' feeling on the overall market now? You're going to be able to give a little bit more of an insight onto the sports card market, and then Jake, maybe other TCG market. I mean, Jake also knows the Pokemon market well, but that's mainly what I know. And are you guys seeing like strong pullbacks? I mean, let me phrase this correctly. We're all seeing strong pullbacks. I think that's a given. But the question is are you starting to see any pullbacks in areas where you weren't really expecting? Because I feel for people who are really hyper focused, a lot of the areas that are really pulling back were kind of obvious in a way. are you seeing any areas that are actually like kind of shocking you where you're like, oh, I didn't expect this card, the pullback or this set or this error or whatever? What about you, Jake?
So not everything is pulling back. For example, like Star Wars, their booster boxes that I was buying for 150, that are now $500, $600. 6 months ago, a year ago, there are cards that are starting to move up. I think there are small niche areas that, because maybe they weren't discovered yet, because they've now become a little bit more discovered or a little hotter, they've gone up quite a bit. We saw that, talking about Upper Deck for a second, with Clear, which Upper Deck owns, with the Marvel cards, we saw PMGs and all these types of things, pretty radically move up. Obviously, those have pulled back quite a bit, but after like getting insanely expensive, very, very quickly, and are still very valuable. And there's a really robust group of, collectors of that. So, but things that already really boomed, pretty much universally, I would say it's fair to say that they've pulled back. The overall markets have pulled back. You're going to obviously be able to find examples of things that buck that trend for whatever reason. Single sales, extreme one of one type cards that just a collector really wanted to buy it and was just willing to pay, a much higher price than ever recorded. But as far as, sports, yeah, it's there's pullbacks in most areas. You do see some like vintage stuff and high grade still selling well, like baseball stuff and high grade. Like there are things that I've heard that, from people who are a lot more knowledgeable than me, that just tell me what's going on. I don't, I hear a lot of it secondhand from people who are like deep into the market, obsessed with this stuff. But sports is such a huge market. Unlike Pokemon, we have different eras and all these sorts of things. Sports, there's 50 different sports, and there's F1 and tennis and WWE and all these different areas. But I think it's a good rule that the things that have exploded the most pretty much universally right now are retracing. I'm not sure what you're seeing, John. Maybe there are some examples that don't fit that, but that's probably pretty accurate. And then the rarest areas, particularly if they didn't go up as much, or they were a little overlooked, maybe, those are usually sticking the best, having the best, having retracing the least, as sort of like a general overview of, like, we're talking about like 100,000 cards over tons and tons of hobbies. So to give one overview is impossible.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple areas of retraces, but I feel we've actually, so Pokemon is in this weird area where, like, how heavily impacted Pokemon is by reprints, and reprints really have the ability to destroy Pokemon products, especially when it comes to modern. So a lot of the products that saw that, I would call it, got hit the hardest for reprints, and the ones that kind of go off the top of my head are like Battle Styles or Chill and Rain. Those products that got beat well under distributor pricing, got beat down to like $80. We saw a couple sales, some of those booster boxes sub $80. I feel like that was a very obvious buy for a lot of people. And there's always risk that comes with that, because if it, for whatever reason, Pokemon decides we're going to even reprint this one more time, even though no one wants it, but we're going to do it anyways, like, there's still that risk there. But I felt like some of those were pretty obvious plays, because prices for what I felt comfortable. Now, what I feel is the floor versus what might in reality be the floor could be drastically different. I could be, way overestimating the popularity of Pokemon, and $80 or $75 may not be the floor. It could drop, but I felt confident there, and we're starting to see products like that retrace. Now, in the vintage area, I want to say, with a lot of, well, there's a lot to take in with the vintage retrace we've seen. A lot of the price retraces we've seen in vintage is the products that we know a lot exist. So products we know a lot exist are like the early WotC sets. So like base set, jungle fossil, especially when it comes to unlimited stuff like that. Those boxes got beat down the hardest, but that's because there was such a massive supply out there being held by people. And maybe people just either didn't know how much was out there, or they didn't care because the market was actively eating it up. I had PokeRev on this channel before, and he was one of the people that paid $30,000 for a base set booster box. So when you got a guy like that who had the ability and, you know, the channel and he could sell those packs even at $30,000. He broke that product and made money. You know, there's people out there, I'll say, $30,000 base set booster box. Everyone hears that number and they're like, well, that guy was an idiot because he lost a ton of money. And I tried to explain to him, I'm like, no, I know who bought it. He's been on this channel. He made money buying it at $30,000. But people are like, oh no, he lost money. I'm like, you know, you just don't understand the market at that point. Like, he made money. But some of the products that I feel are, you know, far less printed. So like Deoxys, Skyridge, I'm still seeing strong sales. One of the more recent sales that I know of personally for a Skyridge booster box was 50,000. 50,000 pre 2021. When you go back 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, $50,000 is still an all-time sale. Same thing with Deoxys. We're seeing prices fluctuate between like 50 to 40, maybe 40 to 60 for those booster boxes. Those are all still really high prices. So it just depends where you look.
But those didn't go up as much. Part of why I think they haven't retraced as much is they didn't go up as much as like, I mean, honestly, the best one has been Neogen in terms of the multiple that it's able to go up and the way that those were $2,000, $3,000. That then
Neogen's got a lot going for it too.
Yeah, and those were $2,000, $3,000. You know, Neo Discovery, some of those Neo boxes. Skyridge was more 12,000. I mean, a 4 or 5x growth is phenomenal. That's somewhat holding it, but like part of it is like a lot of the stuff that went up really crazy high has come back down to about a 4 or 5 multiple right now. And so if you actually bought it at the low, even, you know, now it's the people who bought the things that moved the most up at the high that have lost theoretically the most money in their investment, unless they bought it like PokeRev to break it immediately and sell the packs and had a business behind it. Literally in today's stream, I said, I don't know how high a lot of those boxes actually got from people putting them in their collection versus people who were just opening them, selling the boxes, or people like Mizkif and, you know, who are doing it for like Twitch Week, you know, all the content opening boxes from Ludwig and Mizkif, you know, that they make $40,000, $50,000, you know, every couple of weeks on that type of content. So it's who knows what drove those prices. But it's really interesting when you really look, there's most things have fallen to about that 3, 4, 5 multiple right now within LOTC. They just have, some things have sort of taken different trajectories.
I think just in its entirety across the collectible universe, whether it's sports, you know, entertainment, gaming, whatever it is, I think we're starting to see what's going to be a balancing act, and everything is going to kind of settle to a pre-boom normalcy. You know, I mean, for the last 2 going on 3 years prior to the pandemic, it was a boom like nothing, you know, the collectibles industry had ever seen before. And those conditions are definitely not going to stay that way forever. Is it going to come down to as low as it once was? I think the way I always looked at it is that there's certain assets that are just going to keep a marker for how high something could get, and they're not really going to drive down too much in value. But all that other peripheral stuff and the stuff that isn't quite as prominent, it's going to it's going to go down. The tide is going to go down. It'll come back up too, you know, a decade from now, 15 years from now, it's going to resurge again. But, you know, it's just the ebbs and flows of the collectibles world. And I think a huge portion of that and what fed to the boom is that there were so many people that didn't know that weren't familiar with the cyclical nature of, you know, the life cycle of all this stuff. So you had a lot of new money and a lot of new collectors that hopped in, you know, pre-pandemic, just around the pandemic, that said, I got a lot of time, I got a lot of money, you know, let's find something different. And all those individuals and a lot of those investors and collectors, whatever you want to call them now, are starting to educate themselves on what they've gotten into. And I think through that, you're going to see a huge, balance and a calming down in a lot of ways in certain things. Speaking in the sports world, everything was on fire. No matter what you opened, it was on fire. But all that stuff, especially stuff that came out from Panini, all that stuff is settling back down, and it's turning back to brand loyalty and what brands are most prominent or most tied to quality content. And it's those kind of, whether it be autograph cards or rookie cards, whatever the content is, those are tending to be mainstays and what's driving the value up. So, yeah, I mean, I think people that jumped in within the last 2 or 3 years, you can't be looking for that monster, 10, 100 times, 500 times your investment. But I think, you got to be okay with that 3 or 4 times for the short term. And if you're in it for the long term, hold it. 10 years from now, it'll go up,
Yeah. And you use the word
too, you look at, I'm sorry to cut you off there, John, but you also look at who's getting involved. Like in the entire collectibles industry, you're starting to get legitimate financial, companies and investment companies backing and forming their own other companies to legitimize all their investments, essentially. So anytime you have larger corporations being built to legitimize the transaction of these assets, it means that there's something there and they believe in that asset as a legitimate, financial tool that'll go up in value.
Jake, do you think we saw that at all in Pokemon? Do you think we saw the institutional investor like moving in a little bit more, or do you think we didn't see it as well? Obviously, I probably didn't see it nearly as much as the sports card market, but do you think that had a massive effect on the hobby, or do you think it was very minimal, if anything?
I mean, it depends the range that you look at, but like, what do you know offhand? I don't know how much you know the price history, John, of the sports, but like what was a PSA 10 1986 rookie Michael Jordan or something like that? Like, what was that? Do you know what multiple that has grown, let's say, over the last 3 years?
I'm not that specific card, it's fluctuated all over the place. I remember pre-pandemic, I want to say it was, I don't even think it was a 6-figure card. I think it was like a 20,000, something like that. I don't even remember off the top of my head, but it surged hugely. And it was also, everything was a perfect storm because for Jordan, they had that documentary out for him, the last dance. When that came out, there was a surge in all his collectibles, just surged in value. And his rookie card kind of became really prominent, and it got up to, I think, a $500,000 card. But now it's settled back down to like a $200,000 or $300,000 card. And I think part of the issue with that is a lot of people that were jumping into the hobby, like you see guys like the sports card investor, he's jumped into the market midstream. Like, he's not a guy that knew a ton of stuff coming into the market. He learned it all within the last 2 or 3 years. So he was jumping on a bandwagon saying, oh, this Michael Jordan card, and it pumped the value up because he's got millions of followers, right? In reality, it may have been a little presumptuous of him to say that's the card that's going to set the mark for the whole industry, for the whole, what the rest of the rookie cards, because then everyone's saying, oh, well, if that card's worth that, then LeBron's got to be worth this, or, Magic Johnson's got to be worth this. So it's a whole comparative matchup. But I mean, like, for instance, those National Treasures boxes I was talking about, when I bought a box of them, so we bought 4 boxes in a case back in 2010, and it was $2,000, $500 a box. Those same boxes today are $7,500 per box, almost $30,000 a case. So it's it's tough. It's also the whole game of sealed wax. Do you buy wax and hold on to it to wait and see what that's going to do? That's a healthy market as well.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. You bring up a fact that I still want to talk about, like, the institutional investor, those people who were doing it, dumping money in and probably manipulating the market. And we could talk about that. But I think it's just as valuable to talk about is because you talked about a content creator who was pumping up. I think you said the sports card investor or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's something I also want to talk to, because if we're going to talk about general market, if we're going to talk about TCGs and sports, is how much impact is the social media influencer, and channels like this are really small. I got 3,500 subscribers. Jake's sitting like 7,500. We're not probably swaying the market at all. But now these super large channels, I think it's one thing people just do not talk about enough is social media, is the changing market from that sort of dynamic. And I'm wondering if it's all sort of like jumbled together, where you have like the institutional investor manipulating prices, but at the same time, you have like the social influencer piggybacking, quoting PSA 10 prices, quoting recent sales. And trust me, I do it all the time. Like, and I'm sure, Jake talks about these big sales too. When you look at a heritage auction, or you look at some massive trophy card selling, or a first edition Charizard PSA 10, only 121 of them in the pop. There's 57 people watching this stream. Like, it's such a tough, like, market to look at the most highest end of our hobby. And I'm sure for you, Jay, like Michael Jordan rookies, stuff like that is just on the high end. But I think people might underestimate that sort of influence. But now that brings in, is there any sort of longevity that could come with that? And when does market manipulation almost become, when it stops becoming manipulation and just becomes the market, if that makes sense too? That's like a real blurry line that's almost impossible to navigate.
Well, I think a lot of that, a good portion of that and how to kind of combat that falls on the manufacturers and how they're going to build their products and how they're going to choose to distribute their products. So one of the things that really hurt, the trading card game for a while was the fact that all the licenses in the sports world again, but even so for Pokemon and some of the, other like Magic the Gathering and other trading card games, like those licenses are handled by separate companies. And that forces, imagine where one company could produce the same license, they're going to come out with an array of products, but the appetite for that individual license can only take so much, right? So when it's divvied up between 3 or 4 companies, each individual company could say, okay, we got 5 products for that license. We got to really hammer them home. And then it's up to the consumer to say, hey, I like company X or I like company Y or whatever. But then when you go to exclusives and you have one company producing everything for one license, it turns into, okay, now that license is going to have 20, 25 product lines, all from the same manufacturer. And then it kind of throws off kilter the whole value proposition. Where is my value? And do I like this product, or should I go after that product? And, I think there is going to be a shift back towards that. As I had mentioned, Fanatics and the whole Zero Cool company, you're going to see the balance in the sports world as well, where that's going to start to happen, especially within basketball. You're going to see Topps basketball come back into play. So it'll be interesting to see how that works itself out. But yeah, I think a lot of the market manipulation has an ability to be combated at the manufacturing level, though I don't think there's enough efforts being made there.
What do you think about that, Jake? And
did you have like a specific question, sorry, about market manipulation, or a specific angle you wanted me to?
Yeah, so I guess what I was trying to ask is like that social media influencer, and like the rise of YouTube, and and don't get me wrong, like there was always Pokemon on YouTube, but it was very, very hard to find somebody with a say 1 million subscribers. Now it's becoming easier and easier. You got your Leonharts and your Max Mofos, and Pokerev's about to hit 1 million, and your real
Don
breaking
Diego.
Nates. And what was that?
Don Diego, do you know her?
I know who she is. I've had her boyfriend on the channel before. But you know, there's a lot of people who are starting to become, you know, much larger, and that and so their fan base is drastically different than this one, Jake. But you know, there's always a trickle down effect through some of their. I'm sure I've gotten a lot of subscribers because of Pokerev, you know, and the reason why I got his subscribers because he gets people into this hobby, and then they eventually trickle down to me. But do you think that there's a market manipulation, how they're quoting PSA 10 prices and stuff like that? Or
I mean, it's semantics. Like, what is the line between like marketing and market you know, when something becomes manipulative, you know, you get into like the weeds, obviously, and everyone has their own very strong, often, you know, opinion on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's comfortable for them, what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do. And people let those opinions be known when they don't like, including myself, when we don't like, you know, something that someone does. Certainly in the sports card world, it's very intense, and there's lots of channels yelling at other channels. And I mean, sports is like filled with clicks. I mean, the amount of clicks in sports, you know, these are the good guys. We're the good guys. We're the good guys. We're good for the hobby. We're good for the hobby. And, you know, everyone thinks they're good for the hobby, you know, but, I take a little bit of an approach of like, right, we're all good for the hobby in different ways. We all help promote the hobby in different ways. Generally speaking, there are very few people who are just going to be like, everything they do is just selfishly for themselves. But there's also like, everyone has their own selfish motives, their selfish desires, like what they're trying to accomplish with their own business, whatever. And if you're not careful with that, you can put that before the well-being of other people. And that can come in the form of like really, you know, like extremely shady, scummy stuff, like resealing packs and selling fake stuff. And, you know, we're coming onto YouTube and pumping up and saying that everything's going to go to the moon while you're actively selling, you know, doing some sort of pump and dump type style schemes.
well, you said Booyah said Expedition Zard for 120K on Liquid Marketplace. I wouldn't say that that's an example.
So, you know, with the sports card investors, you mentioned, like, you know, some people really like him, some people really don't like him. Jeff, I think, is his name.
Yep.
You know, some people feel like he, you know, you could say, well, he allowed the success of his channel or his opportunity, like people like him. But it's the same thing in Pokemon. The big people, they're making a lot of money. They have a lot tied up in these hobbies succeeding and continuing to grow. So when they're giving you financial advice, telling you that it's going to grow, is that bias based on they may not be manipulating or lying, but like they really want it to grow because that means their channel will grow. And frankly, he's making a lot more money. He'll make a lot more money probably on his channel and his business and market movers than he'll ever make on flipping cards. And so when his incentives, you know, are going to be connected to, you know, the
misinformation
incentives are going to be connected to him growing the hobby and telling people that it's a good investment. If you kind of tie it in there, I understand why that's difficult. And for him, to be fair, like it's probably something he's very aware of, and it's probably something he's trying to navigate. I think people probably don't give influencers enough credit sometimes to realize how difficult that is to navigate, and how like it's a great business opportunity for him, and he wants the hobby to grow. He also, like, a lot of people have listened to him probably and bought in. He doesn't want to let those people down. He wants to continue encouraging people to stay in and be positive so that their values don't go down, so that the hobby continues to grow, right? There's a lot of these things are complicated, and it's very rare that you can point to someone and just be like, that person's like a scumbag. Like that's an extremely rare sort of thing. Usually it's a lot more sophisticated and complicated than that. But does all of that stuff exist? Look at the stock market, the crypto market, any sort of market where there's a lot of money and people can create content, social media businesses, or, I mean, go on the news and watch people pump up stocks and talk about stocks all day on Fox News Business and CNN Business. You know, it's the same everyone is skirting the same line all the way up to like $100 billion companies down to $10 modern Pokemon cards, right? It's a lot of the same concepts and ideas. I think where the danger is when people aren't aware of that. And so they like get sort of guru'd culty, where they follow someone, they think someone is above, it just loves them. And if they follow everywhere, they're going to make that's going to be their route to success. Like, but I think most people, get out of that, and maybe through some pain or some learning experience. And then you have these like rough periods where I think people fall too much in love with people. They idealize people, they pedestal people. Then they knock them off the pedestal. They're far too angry with those people. They're far too critical and negative. And then usually with some time, it gets into more of a healthy place of like, I listen, I appreciate, them or whatever, what they've done, but also I see, the scars or the, that there is nothing that's just a sort of always a net good, for everyone all the time, and what people can do, including our channels, including everything that we do. So I think that.
So it's funny you say that, because like, how they're pumping up some stuff. And so I think have you ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio? Like the character he's based off of, like the reason he was able to like get big is he was working for a brokerage firm, and he was just a normal broker selling stocks to people, and he was selling like normal stuff, blue chip stocks. Yeah, he was selling blue chip stocks, and his commission was like 1%. So he sells $100,000 worth of stock, he gets $1,000. And then he discovers pink sheet stocks. And then he found out he could sell pink sheet stocks and get a 50% commission. So what they would do, they would pump up, the blue chip stock. So they would be like, hey, buy $100,000 of Bank of America. I think it's going to really go up. And, oh, but by the way, I also have this secret super inside tip of this pink sheet stock. So let's buy $100,000 of Bank of America, and let's buy, say, $20,000 of this super secret pink sheet company. So he would sell $100,000 of Bank of America, get $1,000 commission, but then sell $10,000 of a pink sheet stock, but get a $5,000 commission. But he was selling crappy companies. And sometimes I think about the way people are like pumping up. They'll say, oh, vintage is good, but there's just not like the big gains to be made in vintage, because a lot of the vintage market has already been made. But then I think about some of this modern stuff, people are super shilling, and it's like, well, the percentages are still there. So I don't know, just something to think about. But real quick, Doodles in the Membrane did give us a super chat, so I just want to read it real quick. He said, is there any advantage to selling complementary cards that are graded together in the same listing? For example, PSA 10 Umbreon character rare and alt art, or do pairs of cards don't bring any interest? So in my experience, for the very low end, I have definitely bundled 2 cards multiple times, because you save money in shipping that way, because for first class mail, you're still able to ship 2 graded slabs for the same price as you would 1. So if you have extremely tight profit margins, I would say it's worth it to bundle like 2. Sometimes you could get away with 3 if you know how to ship it right, and you could still sneak it under that first class, but that's when your profit margins are super thin. Now, the cards you're talking about, like, the Moonbreon and stuff like that, those cards are worth so much money alone by themselves. I would say to sell those individually, and only really bundle cards that you have very tight profit margins, where now because if you have free shipping on your listing, where now free shipping starts to matter, for $4 or whatever. That's my advice is high-end cards, I would not bundle together if I didn't have to. Now, as a buyer, yes, buy bundled cards, but don't sell bundled cards. Any guys got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're bundling 2 cards that aren't from the same set, that are just the same Pokemon, probably not generally a good idea, because you're just cutting it. What if someone just wants one of the cards and not the other card? Or do people really usually want both of those cards together? I mean, if it's a card, if there are cards that are very difficult to find and people really want both together, you might have, some people. Now, the more you bundle, the more expensive you make it, the more you limit your market. There's a lot more people who can buy a $400 card than two $400 cards together in the same listing. So there's a lot of reasons why, as a seller, you want to think about, what do people like? What are people willing to buy? And how can I make a listing that is going to appeal to the most people? Now, of course, any one listing any day could do anything. So it really doesn't matter that much for one listing. But if you're a business and you're selling all of the time, getting better at listings can be a major game changer in terms of the amount of money that you make. Whereas one individual thing, like, you might happen to put both of those on and get a higher amount than if you put them both on separately on one occasion. Probably not something, though, that would happen, consistently over time. You'd probably do worse.
I was always personally a fan of just selling individuals. In my shipping policies, I allowed combined shipping, so that always kind of helped me out. Where if one buyer bought two cards, I just combined shipping. But yeah, I always found, especially, trading card games and Pokemon, slightly different. Sports card world, anytime you mix players, it makes things difficult. If you stick with single athlete, single likeness, it's fine to do that. But yeah, mixing subjects up is a little tricky sometimes.
And at the low end, it often makes sense because no one's going to buy the card single, so in sports, I can put together a Jordan lot of like a bunch of 90s, 80s Jordan inserts that are, am I frozen? I don't know. No. You guys are frozen on my thing. I apologize if I'm frozen. Good. Oh, I don't know. My computer's freaking out, I guess. Well, yeah. So like you'll see those lots, right? Where selling one of those cards at $1 or $2 each time, it's not worth the energy. It's not worth the effort. If you bundle them up, you might get 60 and they might actually be worth 120, but that's better than a dealer is going to pay you. A dealer probably isn't going to even be interested in those and might pay you 30% on it, so you can tend to do better if you lot it up and sell it yourself on eBay. But your better cards, like those, your cards that people are really searching for, those specific cards. Yeah. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah. So Thrifty TCG earlier in this video asked a question directed to you, Jay, was asking, did you deal with any Disney cards while you were in Upper Deck? And I think this will help lead us into an important conversation, is that dead TCG conversation. And I want to know something that maybe you could shed a little light on. Now, have you also experienced dead TCGs because you were at Upper Deck for a while, so I'm sure you guys made a lot of products and they just, for whatever reason, didn't work out. And I'd be curious, like, what the business model is recognizing a dead TCG and stuff like that. And what makes a good dead TCG? What makes a bad dead TCG? How do you separate, a Ninja Turtle mass-produced 1989 wax pack versus a Harriet Potter Wizard of the Coast or some Wizard of the Coast stuff like that? Oh, there you go.
The original Mickey Mouse cards.
What year is that?
These are from 1935.
Oh yeah. Wow, that's like almost Steamboat Mickey type craziness.
So it's hilarious that you just showed that, because perfect timing all around. Yes, I worked on Disney products. I was actually in charge of the Disney portfolio. So I came out, my first big hit was Disney Princesses. That was a pretty fun one. It was largely released on ePack, Upper Deck's digital platform, but there were actually some cool like Diamond Relic cards in there, and there's some pretty cool stuff in there. I also made the Upper Deck Mickey Mouse set. I think it was 2019 maybe. And what else did I do? Disney Princesses, Disney Mickey Mouse, and there was another one. Oh, The Lion King. I made The Lion King as well. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously awesome licenses to, work with. And like that content is just, it's endless. And especially like all the concepts that was running through my head for what kind of cards we can make, especially the chase cards, and how I could get creative in that was really exciting. I think, Jake, you just showed something from 1940s or 1930s. We actually we got comic books. There were some early Mickey Mouse comic books from that time frame, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and we got some and actually cut out different unique panels from those to capture, very unique scenes and just cooler imagery from those. And those were some chase cards. But yeah, I had some really grand plans for Mickey Mouse, and the most difficult thing with Disney is they're such a well-oiled machine, and you have to realize that they're the biggest licensor in the world. They've produced the most merchandise for a license for like 100 years. It's crazy. So they have a ton of content, but with that comes a lot of limitations. So they're kind of the department that we dealt with to send back, creative ideas, card designs, just, overall content concepts. It was very difficult because they didn't know the trading card space and they didn't know what might make some really awesome stuff. So it was just a constant back and forth. And, at the end of the day, our resources were quite limited. So nothing too wild came out, but still some cool stuff.
That's awesome.
I think the Princess Diamond Relics, I think there was some pretty valuable cards out of that. There was like I think a 6 or 7 Diamond Relic card in that.
So Jake, when you're looking for TCGs as an investment, are you doing it strictly? I mean, obviously you just showed that Mickey Mouse card. Is that something you're doing more for just a PC thing, or do you see the potential I mean, obviously Disney's a huge IP, Mickey Mouse a huge IP. Are you looking at it as just a personal collection goal or play there? Or are you looking at it with an investment mindset to it?
Both. I mean, usually both to some extent. At the end of the day, though, I don't care. Like, I would it'd be fine if I made absolutely zero money on any of this and I never sold any of it. I don't put money into these things that I can't afford to lose, but it's fun to speculate and think, ooh, I'm so smart and I'm gonna make some great plays and I'm gonna do things that people didn't thought of. It's all part of, I think, the fun and sort of that gambler mentality. But that's very different than like being a real shrewd, smart investor and investing in something that's like really safe and reliable and you can depend on, as we talk a lot about in my channel. I think of them quite different. So if we're using investing as sort of like a softer speculating, then yes. If we're using like investing as like a very like serious, disciplined, like, a path towards retirement, no. For those types of things in particular, I mean, the more niche, but those are crazy undervalued. They're still undervalued. I mean, they've gone up a lot, like lots of other things, and more of the sports guys really. So when everything started to boom, I went to all this stuff pretty quick and started buying all of it up. But I think these things are still way undervalued compared to a lot of things, but everyone has their opinions, and there's so much to collect, guys. I mean, there's so many cool, interesting things. And I think that as you sort of broaden your horizon and learn more about markets, you realize like, like I really like Pokemon cards. They're maybe my primary thing, but there's also a lot of really cool things that I might like. Now, the danger of that is like limited funds. Will that make you happier to actually like start putting money into some other things? And, rather than just focusing on like building your primary, that's just a personal decision. I don't know what's going to make people more happy, but for me personally, I love the history. I want to open a card museum. I want to do a cool thing one day. So I also have that in the back of my mind. And I want to be like an expert or knowledgeable on sort of like every era, every decade, all of the key IPs, eras, and part of the way to do that is to actually like collect it and own it and have it, and and that both from the market perspective and also just like understanding the there's a lot of niche things to understand about each one of these sets, and I enjoy all of that. It's all part of the fun, kind of hunting down that information. I reach out to tons of people all the time to get information, and I have a lot of people who like I give information to, and they give me information, and so it helps me cut through a lot of the noise and get to the good stuff from people who like do this on a daily basis.
So when you hunt down information, so one of the things I look at a lot is I'm always curious. I'm like, how much of whatever I'm going after, how much of this was printed? And a lot of the times I usually don't have anybody I could reach out to. And the only way I could decide how much of this was printed by looking at how much is available on eBay. But even that sometimes could come with a ton of risk, in the sense that maybe it's literally just one person who's sitting on a ton of it, and super, super niche stuff. One person could massively like sway markets there. If say they're sitting on a couple cases and they're just trying to get rid of it because they don't see it as anything investable or any kind of value to it. One person with something that's super niche could have huge impacts on the market. So how do you navigate that area of like understanding how much of something actually exists?
Well, there's always risk, but of course, when a hobby is completely unestablished, there's much, much more risk of that than a hobby that's been out for a long time where there've been a lot of high prices already. Because if you have a lot of high prices already for quite a period of time, that provides quite a bit of financial incentive for that person to at least start offloading some of the stuff. And if they're smart, they're probably not going to flood the market and damage the market anyway, particularly. So even if they are slowly putting it out. And then I know some rough print estimations of like Gum Ink and how much they did the 1938 Horrors of War, how much they did, the 1940 Superman, how much they do the 1935 Mickey, and I talk to people who have been dealing in these cards for 30 years, and they tell me how many packs they've seen. I ask them, how many sealed packs have you seen? How many sealed packs have you sold? What type of condition does it come out of the pack when you've opened? Like the important questions to get a sense of supply. And then there's always that chance that there's going to be some sort of find, right? Or someone is slowly sitting on a lot of it. It's just like, that's way more likely in things that are brand new. I mean, for someone to sit on this stuff for 70 years, never have touched it, talked about it, sold it, and just kept it, and it's like still in like decent condition and preserved it well, it's just like you get more and more. I mean, this stuff is almost 100 years old. I mean, I'm collecting 1890 cards, like playing cards. This stuff's over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. These are antiques. I mean, these things, it's just more and more unlikely the more time that goes by, but there's always risk.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff I'm looking at is from like late 80s, early 90s, junk of the junk era, like a lot of these dead TCGs. And it's like, oh, this TCG died because they put the printer on burr mode, and it just, like Batman, the first movie, series 1 and 2.
I have a lot of fun stuff on my lower shelf. It's like tops, 1980s, 1990s stuff, which is, mass produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman.
Oh yeah. Those are my favorite though.
In this day and age, though, you never know what'll happen. Someone could like murder somebody, or commit some wild crime, or like just change your gender and be a 3-time Olympic athlete after the fact, and then boom, all of a sudden those cards spike in value. So I think that's the cool part about all that stuff is, and especially I think, to a little bit of what Jake was saying too, I think the collecting base has gotten a little bit smarter in terms of how to go about figuring out for new products, and kind of gauge what type of print runs, and trying to figure out scarcity other than just what's out in the market. I think if you look at, I think people, after seeing a certain, company release a similar type of product, you could start to gauge how a product is built and, kind of look at odds and stuff like that to try to figure out rarity. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I didn't know rarity and inserts and all that stuff. It it was a learning curve when I hopped into opening foil packs. And, you know, even you look at insert ratios and stuff like that. And, you know, that at first that had such a huge driver and value. And then sometimes it wasn't always that. And there's a learning curve in being able to figure that out. And I think knowing what to go after. And I think collectors are much smarter at figuring that out today.
And
When you were at Upper Deck, did you sign non-disclosures where you couldn't talk about print runs and stuff like that? Or
yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure, to some degree. Although, like, just my integrity, I wouldn't talk publicly about that stuff anyway, just because. I mean, the logistics of it, I would, but not any individual print runs. Not that I really remember, you know, many things off the top of my head, you know.
I think serialized cards, you know, I mean, even if we want to look at Upper Deck, like Marvel, you know, what they did with like the Marvel PMGs, and because they're serialized and, you know, the pull rates, you know exactly how much the product is printed, and they can't reprint it. And, you know, there's serialized game really changes things for, you know, trying to figure out how much is printed, then also feeling comfortable that more can't be created unless if you start seeing multiple cards out there with the same serial number, that would be something.
Well, you know what's funny about that too is we would create sets, and every so often you would have your serial numbering set up, and, you know, usually there was some uniformity in terms of, you know, like a 399, 299, 199, 99. You had 4 tiers, whatever. But, you know, there were other times where you had that numbering schematic, but then also you just had a ratioed insert or a ratioed parallel. And that ratioed parallel it may have a lower perceived value because it's ratioed and not serial numbered. But then the actual, like, print run of that card, even though ratio, would be like 150. So if you look at it, it would be the second most scarce card other than the 99s. But it did not recognize that card as being way more rare than the other 3. So there's a whole lot of little nuances to that for sure.
That's something I never really thought about, is that the non-serialized stuff could potentially, because of insert rates, actually be rarer. It's something I never really considered. Now, in Pokemon, that's something we don't really ever deal with, is numbered or serialized cards. Now, I know Magic the Gathering has recently moved to that sort of. Now, Jake, have you been following that market at all? Has serialized numbers been holding premiums for Magic the Gathering, or is it not as big of an effect as a lot of people thought? Because Magic is a player's game, it's not a collector's game, right? For the most part.
So what's going on with serialized there right now? I've been a little bit out of like modern Magic. Are there serialized cards in sets, or is it's just specialty product?
I think it's specialty products right now.
It's not affected because, like, the modern sets they're doing okay. Like, some sets are doing better than others, but it's all based on playability. Like, when we talk about you know, the value of the last like 4 or 5 sets, like 3 of them have done okay, like 2 of them have been terrible, you know, and it's, my understanding is it's just based on playability. But I'm not a modern Magic is something that I don't do at all. So I only do vintage Magic.
I'm wondering, I guess this is a tough conversation, especially for Pokemon, is that big what if Pokemon decides to go to, you know, like serialized cards, because we're already seeing how the Pokemon market handles scarcity, and then to really add in like that true artificial, you know, scarcity, artificial rarity, which is what serialized numbers really do. I just don't know how the Pokemon market as a whole will handle it, because I've talked about it before. Like, I think we get really like into the niches of the niches, but I don't know about the average collector who is looking at Pokemon cards, if they really care about serialized, if they're looking at real true rarity and scarcity, because I almost laugh at myself sometimes when I have to hear what people think about Pokemon and they say, we need kids to keep opening this stuff. And in the back of my head, I'm like, that's who's opening this for the most part. Like, there's definitely the adults opening Pokemon, but there's a ton of kids opening it. Like, you could ask like Mason. He's going to tell you kids love to open Pokemon cards. So
Yeah.
I think even us, we underestimate the collector base and the amount of kids opening it, and this people that really don't care about that rarity scarcity factor.
Well, kids do care about rarity and scarcity. So, and
I
kids,
think at a high level though,
oh
like
yeah,
to numbered cards, they would.
oh my God. If a kid could pull a 400, if you as a kid, I mean, I was a kid collector, right? And when I pulled inserts, it was extremely exciting. And I was 8, probably 7 when I started doing sports. And if those cards had, and then I had a thing where I could look up the values and the prices, guide.
Yeah,
that,
the
kid,
paper
right?
book, I have them.
Yeah, like, can you imagine if you could have pulled a $400, $500 or 10,000, a $900,000 Steph Curry, like, or whatever, like
I remember flipping out over a $40 hockey card.
Exactly. So I see these kids at conventions walking around with like $80,000 worth of sports cards, or Pokemon cards or other sorts of things. So I think now some kids won't care about that and won't be interested in that. Just like some adults don't care and aren't as interested in that. I think that and memories are really created often around like that really valuable. I mean, part of the reason why Charizard was the most expensive card when we were a kid.
Nothing's really changed for the most part. Charizard's still the most expensive card. Like, nothing's changed. Like, people could shit on Pokemon and they could say what they want about Gen 1, but Gen 1 starters, they bring the heat, man. They've continued to bring the heat. Like, now the question is, like, a Rillaboom. Is a Rillaboom going to be equivalent to a Venusaur in the future? I would say the smart money's no, but I could be wrong.
I mean, one thing that's interesting, right, is that, Pokemon is a game. Magic's a game. When we talk about sports, when we talk about Star Wars, when we talk about a lot of these other IPs and what they're doing, Marvel, they're not games. So they're really just gearing towards collectors. When you do serialized, obviously serialized, unless they like somehow put that into the game format, which I doubt, they would ever do. It would be super weird and would be pretty unfair, but it would be like, it really would be a move to Pokemon saying we're really moving to collectability. I don't know why that would bother players, but it seems to. Now, if they really stopped catering to players and stopped making products affordable, I mean, the worry in doing stuff like that is now the booster boxes are much more valuable. If you bring a first edition stamp, now they're $600, $700, $800 out of the gate, rather than $80. So you would have to figure out how to make it hard enough to pull them, or different levels of products, or some products where you could, get, just your playable cards, some ways of distributing it. But it's definitely a logistical nightmare to try and sort out. And there'd be lots of positive responses, negative responses, and there'd be lots of like unintended consequences, and it would probably be a pretty big risk for a company that is absolutely dominating the space already.
Yeah, they're dominating.
That would be the only like, it would be a move that I think they would do if they had to. Marvel,
it would be out of necessity, than out of just a want. Yeah. But Rattle said there's already impossible chase, and he's right, because when you think about, so I don't know how well you know modern Pokemon, JT, but right now the chase factor for modern Pokemon is unattainable for the average person. Meaning, if you wanted to go, like, I don't know what you remember about Pokemon, but probably going back to 99 for like base set Jungle Fossil, finishing collection goals, super attainable, meaning it wasn't out of the realm of break the bank. Now, to open up modern Pokemon cards to complete a master set is just, it's a fake number at this point. Like, we're talking so much money that there's no 9-year-old in the world, unless their parents are absolute millionaires, could complete this. Like, for me as a kid, base set Jungle Fossil were very attainable. Maybe I couldn't get all the hollows, but for the most part, I could get a lot of my collection goal, even with my mom buying me 5 packs a week or 4 packs or 2 packs on a Saturday,
Yeah.
being lucky, over the course of 6 months or whatever, 2 packs a week, that adds up when you're looking at base set and you only got to open up, your chance of pulling a Charizard is like 0.8. So like pretty much 1 per booster box. Definitely going to get it if you open 2 kind of stuff. But you look at modern chase cards now, it's forget about now to add a serialized aspect to it. I mean, Pokemon's got to be printing hundreds of thousands of booster boxes at this point, So he's right when he says, please do not add serialized cards. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, I'm not a big Pokemon collector, but I wouldn't want them. I would look at it as a lazy step. Just to, one of the things that always stuck out to me about Pokemon was I wasn't able to tell the difference between a lot of the, rare versions of the same card. So like whether it was a first edition or not, or like some crazy Japanese, parallel, or, I'm obviously not saying it right, but whatever the circumstances, there were little nuances about, certain pieces of information on the card, or the little first edition stamp that wasn't there on the regular version that distinguished it. I think I would imagine the Pokemon collectors would want those kind of changes to be made, as opposed to, here, this is rare because it's serial numbered.
Yeah.
You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to. There's no kind of mystery behind it. It's here. It is.
When you
and
look
as far
at
as the chase, like, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I get what you're saying. You're not going to be able to complete a set, but at the same time, that's what helps provide value to the rest of the set.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when you look at base set, and when you look at one of the most popular cards in the set is just the Pikachu card. Think of how many variants, Jake, there are of that Pikachu. You got first edition in red cheeks and yellow cheeks. You got Shadowless in red cheeks and yellow cheeks. You got unlimited. You got the E4 or E3 stamp, not E4, E3 stamp. You got the Poke Tour stamp. There's like all these different nuances of one of the arguably more popular cards, a card that's now been reprinted multiple times, and all the way up to Celebrations. That card's been reprinted twice. Once as a metal card, once as the full art card. But look at how many nuances to that card. And then if you talk about like every single reprint of that card, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the challenge is to revolutionize that. And how do you keep, kind of reinventing the same asset over. I mean, kudos to them. They're still for it. It's huge, but yeah, it's definitely a tough hill to climb.
So Lee Martinez said PokeRev opened almost 1,000 packs last night to complete Pokemon Go. I mean, Pokemon Go. So for you out there, anybody who may not know, Pokemon Go being a specialty set, meaning it's not available in booster boxes. So you only could get it in ETB. So you're only going to get 10 packs at a max per ETB, $50 an ETB. To open up 1,000 packs for the average kid is, I'm just going to say, it's impossible. It's impossible for me. I cannot open up 1,000 packs.
A lot of snowy shovels, driveway, so it's a lot.
There's a lot of shoveling, a lot of raking leaves. But yeah. Jake, let me ask you a question. When do you think, if you had to pick the set or the timeline, when would you say completing sets by opening it yourself became unattainable? Can you kind of pinpoint an area of time?
I mean, I never have done that.
Yeah.
For me, I opened the most I've opened actually was in the Sun and Moon era back then. And I opened quite a bit, but maybe like 2-3 boxes of each set or something like that. and I maybe got like a 1 to 2 of the rainbow rares, right? So I was pretty far away from completing the 13 rainbow rares, and then, you know, all the full arts and et cetera, even from those. So, I mean, we're talking back in days where probably WotC, where there are only the hollows. I mean, even when they started adding the shinings and the crystals, it already became, you know, just more and more difficult to do that. Whereas just when it had regular hollows, it was, you know, if the booster boxes weren't expensive, you know, back when they weren't, it was more doable. Of course, I was a kid back then, so completing like one of every hollow for base set was like a massive achievement that took me like, you know, over a year of collecting my one pack every 2 weeks that my
and you brought that to the playground. It was like, look at what I got.
Yeah. So so as far as the serialized stuff, like I really enjoy serialized cards. I think that they're really fun. But I definitely don't enjoy them in place of like high quality art that I'm, you know, I think one of the things that I really don't like about some of these other markets is I'll be like, the card sucks, but it has like a 1 of 1 or a 1 of 5. So it's really valuable. Like it can take away the beauty of it or the aesthetic value and put so much value on like the rarity of it or the number of it. But I also get that we love rarity. It's really fun to collect and chase rarity. You know, do I want Pokemon to do serialized cards? Definitely not. And definitely not in this environment. I think Pokemon's doing great. I think the art's great. I think people are having a blast opening it. The only thing that could make some sense is if they wanted to try something with the tops, with a Fleer upper deck, you know, doing something different, you know, trying a parallel sort of thing to see if people, I mean, I certainly would buy it, you know, and give it a try and probably enjoy opening it.
I'm at the point I'd buy anything.
I'm not craving that, you know, and there's also like, I can get that in Star Wars. I can get those types of products in so many other IPs that I love. And I don't want people to be upset. Like, and they're just people in the Pokemon card community are just like very anti that sort of thing. It would really upset them. And it certainly wouldn't make me happy enough and it would make me unhappy for them to do it in the main boxes. And, you know, it would just be weird. It's unnecessary. Now, if they did it for like certain Art Academy type things and trophy things so that we didn't have these like extra copy issues so that they could actually grade, like there might be areas where it would be interesting if they added that. But for your average, you know, sets, I have no interest in it. Maybe a Topps collab would be the only thing I'd be interested in seeing how that would work. But it would be such a ridiculous, I mean, it'd be so expensive and it would be scalped like crazy. And there'd be so much negativity, you know, probably not worth bringing it in because Pokemon's already doing so well.
It would be interesting how Topps could go from the set no one wanted to the most expensive modern product in Pokemon history. That would be a good Topps get in there. Gotcha. After all these years.
So Alan says like in the chat, like, let's try it for a year. I think what's really hard is that like, can you put it back in the bag? Once Pokemon has moved to that, it's like now that's the chase, and now regular, you know, unserialized, like it would also like really hurt the value, in my opinion, of like so much stuff if they added serialized. So yeah.
It's interesting.
So Rattle, like so you have trophies that have names and extra copies don't, but you have things like Art Account. There are plenty. There are examples, and then there also could be copies that multiples that do, you know. And then when we talk about like world's stamped cards and all sorts of things, it'd be nice to know that there were a certain amount that were actually given to players. That the thing you owned actually was owned by a player given to the artist.
That's a problem we're running into with like Japanese like trophy cards, point cards. It's there might be like one guy out there who somehow has all of them. What the heck is going on kind of stuff. But again, that at this point you go into the speculation, the niches, and is it just one guy selling them all? Did he steal them from the factory? Was he working for Pokemon? What was he doing? It's like that's a guy I would love to get on this channel someday.
They're out there, I'm sure.
Oh, there's Yeah, so Rattle said Art Academy is bad with extra copies sold when the winner holds all real copies. Yeah, because Art Academy is what's supposed to be 100 copies to the winner only, and then he gets one of every other one, correct?
Yeah. No. Just the winner, I believe. He just gets his own. He doesn't
Oh,
get
I thought he got one copy. Oh, okay. I always
I don't
thought he
think
had
so.
one copy of the other ones
I
too.
could be wrong randomly, but not Art Academy, I don't think. I mean, someone correct me if I'm off by one on that.
Okay.
But I think they're just legit 100 copies to everyone. And the reason, we saw like Collectors Cash auctioning a bunch off at one point, and the story was that they seem to have gotten it from someone who wasn't the original seller. The Kyogre owner in particular was like publicly upset because he didn't want any of his to ever get out, or I don't know what he, but
so random. All right, I'm gonna do a little shilling at this point, but we're working. We got T-shirts coming out for our podcast with Rattle and Ryan, and we got we have one of the Art Academy winners. We're trying to get him to do the artwork for the shirt, so that would be pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Which one?
Be free like a Butterfree Art Academy winner. But yeah, Rattle's talking about like protozoites. Yeah, that we're going into the niches. Poor Jay's like, I have no clue what the protozoites is. It's
Hey, dude, I get it though. Like I don't understand the Pokemon worlds very well, but
yeah,
after seeing how trading cards are made and just how the market and the appetite for the market, it's wild to see how products are made and how we tailor them to certain customers. It's a crazy experience.
yeah, and even when you were great. I don't know how much you could talk about, but you were telling me stories, even how you graded cards. You had your cards graded through BGS, which most people don't grade with the Pony Express. The fact that you did, which is awesome, but the fact that you emailed like the president directly, how you got his direct email and stuff. I know you probably can't really talk about that stuff, but
well, so at Upper Deck, it was funny. You had mentioned Jake. You had mentioned the price guides previously, flipping through the sports price guides. So I always had my nose in that Beckett magazine, and when I went to work at Upper Deck, my boss was one of the individuals who like contributed a ton of content to that magazine. He also came up with the Beckett grading system. So like it was just crazy. It was a crazy experience having, kind of been under that tutelage for most of my collecting career. And then when I started working there, it was the guy who was in charge of creating most of that. But yeah, I just had a good connection with him, and he introduced me to some of his other colleagues from his days at Beckett, and for that reason, I just went that way. It was a pretty easy, situation I had to get cards graded. Although I still had to wait a long time. I remember the last one I waited well over a year. So there's not a whole lot of preferential treatment unless you're willing to spend a lot of money. But yeah, I kind of wish I had gone PSA. PSA is obviously a little bit better value, but still got some nice slabs.
yeah, I feel like Beckett for sports, you're probably, I don't know the sports card market well enough, but you're doing well. But now this is an interesting thing. So we're running into the area where now PSA has dropped down to $30 for members. Now for Pokemon, you really start to get on the borderline at $30. It's the real argument of, do I want to grade a PC card, like something from my personal collection for $30? Really, $30 is more for the flipping, selling aspect. Now, there's a decent amount of cards in Pokemon at $30. It drastically gets way more at 20, and then it explodes at 10. Now, I want to say for the sports card market, though, at $30, there has to be a huge window of cards that are worth grading. No?
Yeah, I mean, as you touched upon, it all has that kind of maximum value. So, yeah, it's $30, but that's for max value of a card that'll be worth $1,500 or something like that. So, in the case of if I wanted my Steph Curry to be PSA graded, that's going to cost me a lot more than $30 because of how much that value is. But I mean, it all depends on really the resale. I'm looking at, in my mind, I'm not going to go get a card graded for $30 unless I know it's like a $250, $300 card graded. You know, at that point, I'll just keep it raw. But I don't know. It's, as a sidebar, I was at the PSA facility a couple months ago. Actually, I saw their entire operation, and it's wild. There's so many cards there.
Wait, you went to California to PSA?
Yeah, I was at the PSA facility. It's they're under the Collectors Universe umbrella, and their whole facility is pretty huge, and it's quite the process. Like they revamped it a little bit, and it's a very independent as far as the people that handle the card prior to it getting to the grader, and like that, it being anonymous. Once the grader gets it, he has no information on who's sent it in or anything like that. So they have a pretty crazy process, and yeah, I was behind the scenes. It was wild.
I got my first ever graded slab submission coming back. The delivery date is Monday. So
nice. That's exciting.
Yeah, I sent it out in May at $25 a pack. It's just like it's a lot of well, it's not a lot. It's all Pokemon, but it's majority modern, just because I was curious like how the grading process worked. And right now, so I gotta think, give me a second. I can think. I'm like 40% PSA 10 rate. I didn't get anything lower than a 9, but only 40% 10s. So I have no clue if that's good, if that's bad.
That's pretty good though. No, that's not bad at all. I mean,
is that
nines
good?
aren't
I don't know. For PSA 10s for packs, I don't know the scale. I have no clue.
I mean, it all depends. Like some people will just be like, "Oh, I'm getting everything graded," and they don't take their time to look through what should and shouldn't be graded. So that's why their rate might be a little worse. But like 40% isn't terrible. I happen to have a really good eye for grading. So anytime
But
that I got stuff graded, of grading packs. Oh,
PACKS. Yeah, I have no clue how. I honestly, the packs I sent were all modern, and I looked through them all. I was like, I think this is good. So a lot of the packs that I sent for the modern, I pulled out of, you don't know what they are, but they're single blisters. They come in cardboard like sleeves.
yeah.
I didn't send a lot of packs out of booster boxes, because sometimes in booster boxes, like when cards sit on top of each other, there's like an indent of the flap from the behind, like you could kind of see it impressed into the foil pack. So I didn't send any of those. I sent stuff like that I thought was going to be graded good, and I just don't. I have no clue at this point. Zero.
Yeah, I'm not, like, I'm familiar with graded packs, but I know in like 2003-4 Topps Chrome basketball, people grade those packs and they're like $2,500 a pack. And then it's funny because you see people like buy one that's PSA, and then they get it and they crack it out. They want to open it, hoping for the LeBron, and they get like Nick Collison, and they're like, "Oh man, I just wasted $2,000." Like, yeah, pretty much. That's about a $3 pack there, big fella.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot more sense in sports with older wax packs when a lot of them are resealed and faked, and you're hoping. I mean, the one you open from PSA could be fake as well, of course, but like you're hoping that it's real, and it's much safer than obviously buying like a random. Here's a 1986 pack you might pull Ricky Jordan in. Like, yeah, right. Like almost certainly, I would never buy a loose one online. Same with like the gum ink packs from like the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s that I try and find and try and buy. I would never buy one that isn't graded just for authenticity purposes. The grade could not care. I think it's ridiculous. If I'm being completely blunt, I just think it's ridiculous. Why is this a 9? Why is this a 10? Why is this an 8? Obviously, with cards, there are people out there making the exact same case. I think there's a clear difference. But it's also just like, I just care about what's inside and that it's authentic and that it looks good enough for me to like display. Like the only reason why I would want graded packs of some of my favorite pack arts is the protection and the fact that it be like easier to display in sort of a nice uniform thing. And then I might care about the number so that they're all the same number, just in terms of like as a preference as a collector. But the value perception that people are willing to pay for like 10s versus 9s versus 8s. I mean, when I'm seeing people pay $120, $130, I was seeing people pay for like PSA 10 Hidden Fates packs, like a single pack of Hidden Fates going for $130.
I sent Hidden Fates packs.
Yeah, it's just it's bananas. But there's banana stuff all over the place in every hobby. So that exact thing is happening all over the place all the time.
So there was a PSA 7 demo pack. Did you see that on PWCC, Jake? It was a PSA 7 demo pack. It was one of the random Sunday night auctions I missed, and that was like one that I really wanted because it was already in slabbed PSA 7. I could care less about a demo pack grade. Like we already know what's in it. It's just a bunch of shadowless cards. You could already know, but it was like the one that I missed that I still think about because I think it went super low for demo packs because it was graded and got a 7, meaning if you cracked it out, those demo packs sell for a premium already. And it just sold for super cheap. And it's one of the PWCC recent auctions I really miss, like being sad missing out on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you see the same kind of thing in ticket stubs now. Ticket stubs are going wild. And yeah, to your point, I mean, unless the ticket stub is like absolutely completely jacked up to the point where I can't read it, then yeah, I want a better copy. But the difference between an 8 and a 9 on a ticket stub, I'm not going to pay that much more for it,
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly in Pokemon and some newer hobbies that I think we were in a grading mania, and I think premiums that people are paying for 10s, people care way too much about condition rarity and not enough about absolute rarity in terms of, in my opinion, in markets. But it's the worst in some of these newer, younger markets. Sports has a much longer history, particularly in the vintage stuff, because they're used to like a 7 being a phenomenal grade or like a 5 being like a really strong grade, right? But 2 5s are not created equal. And it doesn't mean they both shouldn't be graded a 5. It just means one can have really nice eye appeal. The other one can have not so great eye appeal, and so the eye appeal one, the good Mickey Mantle 5 versus the bad Mickey Mantle 5 could sell for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollar differences and do. Yeah. Now we've made progress in the Pokemon hobby where people are starting to buy the card and the grade. And when I say that, I mean, buy a card. If it says PSA 10, make sure the card is actually a PSA 10. If you want a PSA 10, buy the card and the grade together,
Right.
But when we start getting into lower grades in particular for higher end cards, that's when eye appeal becomes more and more important because you're going to see more and more. I mean, I have PSA 1s and 2s that are nice, good looking vintage, old vintage cards. Some of these cards are worth multiple thousands of dollars because they're really important cards. And then I have like a 1 or 2 that could look like it was like crinkled up and thrown into the trash can. You know what I mean? So like, it can vary. And you're buying an item, you're buying the card inside, particularly for your really high end items. The case costs $20 to put around it, $30, maybe $500 if they charge you that. Like the vast majority of the money and the values in the card itself. So make sure you look at the card.
Well, it's like you talked about eye appeal. You think about that Crystal Charizard graded by CGC, the one that got the 10, and the front centering of that card is absolutely terrible. And then the Green Shiz had the head grader from CGC, and he mentioned the card. And he said, well, the back centering is perfect. And it's like, I don't care about the back centering. I'm looking at the eye appeal of a card. And if I want a Crystal Charizard in a 10 for a CGC 10, which is now one level higher than maybe a PSA or whatever, however you want to deal with that, like eye appeal matters for that card. When the front of the card is off centered, it's not a 10 in my book, you know? I don't know.
And that also kind of determines what company you decide to go to for grading, because some companies, you know, are a little bit more attentive to centering and corners versus another company that's going to be a little more heckler on the surface. So there's all that comes into play when choosing which grading company to go with, you know.
Yeah, PSA corners all day. Back, or at least for Pokemon, back whitening, like that's when I send cards to PSA, that's the number one thing I look at. Is there whitening on my corners? Because if there's not, it's gonna get a PSA 10. I don't care. Like, I mean, if the centering is drastically bad, like it won't, but that's the one thing I look at. Corners, then edges, then centering, and then the last thing, well, surface with the exception of binder digs. Like, that's not really true. It's still like all around, but corners is the number one I look at, and then for hollows, hollow print lines and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Like, you could pick up a card that looks absolutely tremendous. First thing I look at is the corners. If one out of those four corners look like it's not going to be a 10, it ain't worth getting graded for me, because maybe not worth getting graded, but it's not going to be a gem mint.
Yeah,
You know?
you get into the nuances of like what's worth grading. Yeah. But Jake, you had a recent return come back. I would say a couple months back. You had like a bunch of reverse hollow Skyridge cards, just some random WotC hollow stuff like that. And I saw you actually hit a decent amount of like Skyridge reverse hollows, which for me, I've had pretty shitty luck grading those. I've gotten a lot of 9s just because so much hollow surface area. But have you felt that PSA has changed their grading skills a little bit? Because I think a lot of people talk about CGC changing their grading skills. And I think now that they've released a pop report, the numbers have come out. It appears to be that, yes, they have changed it. You could get into the nuances. Are people sending higher quality cards, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
But
Dan has a good video where he actually goes over the math so far. That's like just up recently for people who are interested.
Do you think people, or do you think PSA has changed their grading skills from your experience from like where you were a couple years ago to your most recent return? Do you feel that they were a little bit stricter or harsher, I should say?
If I was forced to say something, I would say yes, but I don't really like the conversation that much. I'm one dude. I have my own experiences with what I have. I feel like narratives can get spread a little bit too far and wide by lots of people who didn't even get a lot of cards back. I've probably gotten like 400 or 500 cards back. It's not a big enough amount to really claim anything. Some of the cards they graded higher than I would have. Some of the cards are graded lower than I would have, like every submission. Some of the cards were surprisingly low, but I could have missed some damage. I still don't see the damage on some of them, but
crack them, resubmit them, make a video. That's a good video, Jake. You just get a super low grade. Did you see that Charizard that recently got submitted 3 times? I think
it was
Rattle used it. It started as a 4, then went to 4 or 5, then regraded to a 7, then regraded to a 9 finally.
Yeah. I got it sent to me on Instagram by the person who did it as well.
Okay.
I think they're sending it out to a lot of people. So yeah, you know, how many of those are one-offs? How often is that? How much does it really matter? People have strong opinions on it. I care more. I've always been an absolute rarity over condition rarity guy. And I think that I have felt that we have been in a grading mania. So I've been buying like that. I've been, that being said, I still enjoy 10s, particularly 10s that are actual 10s. And I think there will be a market for that. And if there isn't, that's fine. Like, you know, people can do whatever they want and like whatever they want. The whole sort of like the conversations, the deep dives, like what Rattle does on like fakes and them grading fakes. I really like that stuff. Like I mean, companies messing up authentication is extremely cut and dry. The conversation around like, are they doing a really bad job grading? Are a lot of 7s being graded 10s? Like, it's definitely true and happens. And I think it's fine to share and talk about. I'm just not sure how widespread it is, how much will it be an issue going forward? Was it more of a product of like them being understaffed, having way too much of a backlog in cards, and maybe they press their employees too hard to grade too fast or to grade too. I mean, these are things we just don't know. This is a company built of real people. And, you know, it's stuff that in 10 years, I'll have a better idea, like, you know, of what happened and the different period, you know, it just feels people, for me, have too strong of opinions too quickly in this day and age. That's what I'll say.
Rattle just said, how many CGC non-welded slabs are we going to see before they fix the issue? So
Yeah,
honestly,
that's another crazy.
I thought they fixed the issue. And then all of a sudden, I just see all these cards come back from CGC without the slabs welded. And I remember so there was like the one famous one, like the very first one where the guy made the YouTube video and he pulled it apart and then everybody lost their freaking minds. And then it just stopped. But now all of a sudden it's happening again. So I'm hoping it happens to the point. I don't know why nobody has taken one of those slabs that has broken apart, and they could at this point now break any slab, put a Gem Mint 10 and put the worst condition card ever in it. Put the card in it and then say, look at this pristine 10 or whatever I got. People would lose their minds. I don't know. I think that's a big
be
problem.
careful with someone doing that to slander CGC. So people, like when people send me, like I believe the guy who sent me the Charizards because he seems like a really good guy, but like someone could easily have just cracked 3 random cards and then pretended that Charizard was the one that moved up to a 9 because they want some Instagram fame and attention and they want YouTubers to talk about them.
And you're right, and it would have worked. And,
right. It is working, right? If the person's done it. I trust that person. That seems like a nice guy, but it's just the point is just that like people also want to believe like what they're biased to often.
Yeah. No, that's a great point though. How you just, that was a perfect example too. So that's definitely possible.
But the more examples of that, and then examples of that from people like people like Pichu fan, who like, you know, like people who I know, like who've been in the hobby for a really long time, people who like, they just aren't clout chasing. They're not interested in YouTubers talking about them. Like, you know, there's going to be like more credible sources. And then the more times that happens over a longer period of time, the more I would be like, yeah, this is a, when does it become a systematic problem that deserves us talking about it all the time? And when is it sort of like, yeah, it happens and it's good to educate people and you need to be aware of it, but it's not like a systematic issue, you know, or an extreme systematic issue. And
Rattle just said, how do knowledgeable people in the hobby rely on graders who make far less than they would ever take for a salary? Rattle, you literally just quoted a E4 thread from years ago when I remember it was King Pokemon put this exact question up there. This has been beaten to death, this question. No one knows. We blindly send our cards out for massive premiums by the minimum wage. I think PSA has gotten better with the pay, especially being California and stuff. Don't quote me on that, but
yeah, some of the positions are definitely a little more well paying, and I think, but it's a great point that they're underpaid for some of the. You know, you got a guy that's handling $1 million card, but he makes
how many
$20 an hour? It's like,
Jay, how many millions worth of cards a day is he holding? Because for Pokemon, maybe not so much, but for sports, that's pretty easy. You can handle $1 million worth of cards.
Oh yeah, no problem with some of the content they have going through there. Absolutely, and I think that gave some grading companies a huge black eye for a little while, and the whole process really is that there was a lot of shady stuff going on behind the scenes with, you know, graders and you know, people that were grading large amounts of cards and like, you know, backroom deals and some shady stuff going on. I think most of that has been eradicated, and it is down to, essentially you do have to trust an hourly employee with your, you know, pretty expensive stuff. But for the most part, from what I've seen from PSA, like I said, I was there a few months ago. They run a pretty tight operation, and you know, they're always updating their slab technology and stuff like that in terms of creating new barriers so they, you know, those slabs can't be, you know, reproduced or you know, faked,
Yeah.
basically.
I look at it this way. Do you trust when you go up to the McDonald's drive-through and get a burger? Do you trust the person making minimum wage to handle your food? Do you trust that person enough to eat the food? And my answer to that question is I trust the guy who's making minimum wage at McDonald's to handle my food with his bare hands and still eat it. Like I don't know how else to phrase it. It's like I trust that guy. I trust the guy with my expensive cards. Probably both of those situations, if you really were to break it down to the core of it, it's like probably shouldn't trust the guy making your food at McDonald's. Probably shouldn't trust your guy grading your $10,000, you know, Charizard from Skyridge. Like,
I mean, there is, at least on the, you know, in getting something graded, there is a little bit of production as far as once you have submitted something and it is in their possession. There's a little bit that can be done there. So there's that, but it is definitely a nerve-wracking process, 100%.
Rattle said,
I
where are
mean,
the slabs made?
there is craziness and nonsense everywhere. Like, welcome to the world. Welcome to
2020. Bitches.
Yeah. So like for sure there's a rationality, but there's also reasons, right? Then the reasons why these things are valuable is it provides, when I go onto eBay and I buy this card and it's a 10 and I look at it, you know, I'm more confident that it's going to be a 10. I'm more confident that it's going to be authentic. Am I 100% confident? No. You know, but it gives me some level of confidence, some more level of confidence. One thing I say is that if a card is graded, it's more likely to be real than an ungraded card, but there's still a chance it's fake. Like they're doing something. If you give me a random card that I've never looked at and it isn't graded a PSA 10, and you give me a PSA 10, it's more likely that the PSA 10 is a PSA 10 than the random card that no one's looked at, right? If you just pick a random card from a binder. So there's some value. Now, how much value is a different sort of question. And then you have people who are just binder collectors who don't like it at all and don't like things being slabbed. But that's a whole different thing.
And I'm jealous of those people, to be honest with you, Jake. Like, in a way, I'm jealous of them. But my problem is I need grading to grow my collection. And it's almost like that catch-22 of, even if I don't agree with grades all the time, I need to grade my cards because for me, in order to sell my cards, to grow my collection, I need to maximize profit. And one of the ways I maximize profit is by grading. And if I didn't have that ability to grade my cards in order to maximize, then my personal collection doesn't grow at the rate or the speed that I want it to. Like, don't get me wrong. I could, in theory, sell all those cards raw and probably even sell them at a profit. But the profit is going to be substantially less for a raw card opposed to that same card in a PSA slab with a gem mint 10 on it. It's just,
if nobody likes slabs and everyone is just grading to make money and profit, we're in a mania. That's the definition of a bubble. And will it ever pop? Maybe.
yeah.
I don't think that's true.
No,
I think that there's real actual value in the rarity and the chase. There's psychological value that is beyond just the idea of I can profit. Now, is there some mania, the idea of I just can profit and I don't like this and I'm doing it just to make money? Absolutely. That absolutely exists as well. So, and you can decide how much that mania exists, you know, everyone out there.
So I just, I don't know. I just like to YOLO it once in a while. I send a good old Rattle an invite to this chat if he wants to chime in.
Okay.
I mean, is it exciting? Do you enjoy collecting PSA 10 Skyridge cards? Does that add something to your collecting journey in Skyridge for you?
Yes and no. So I'm almost completed my entire 9 set in Skyridge. So I have a lot of duplicates of certain cards. And the reason why is because I haven't been selling any. And the reason I haven't been selling any is because right now I think that the 9s are undervalued. But I also think that they're a good value in relative to the set because for a lot of 9s, like they're pretty near mint. I mean, when you look at late e-reader sets for Pokemon, print quality is fantastic. But your question was what? Like
trying to put value aside, and value is all tied in this because part of why we like these things often has to do with like that we could sell them. And that is part of the value of anything that holds of a store of value. People, why do people like fine art? Why do people put lots of money into fine art? Yeah, they like looking at them, but they also like the prestige and the feeling, you know, it's like it's
so
right. There's
so
all
you're-
sorts, but if we try to bring that out as a collector, do you get joy of like, I own something now. I own a perfectly pristine, decided by this company version
yes.
of a card that I really want to chase. And any day I could go out and get it in a 7, but I have the only one in the world that's a 10. Does that excite you? Do you get a dopamine release? You know?
So so this is why I get excited, because for me, when I look at something like that, I break down what is that, and that is something that to me, in all my experience in the hobby, to me, I believe in my heart of hearts that that is something that is very rare, because that set is very rare. I'm very familiar with like pack prices, booster box prices. So if I can pick up something in that would be a chase or something where when you would open up a, Skyreach packs, you're talking $1,400 to $1,600 for a pack, hoping it's unweighed. To pull a chase card in that is a hollow. Now, there is a huge range of what that chase is, but for me to pull a hollow and be able to, especially on the lower end cards, if somebody were to open a heavy pack and pull that hollow, it's still like a happy thing, because at least it was heavy. When you open up any packs, like there's always in the back of your head like this thing might be light. So now you're picking up the chase card. Now you have to go, is that card going to be a 9? Is it going to be a 10? And then it's going to be a 10. You get it. So yeah, I get the dopamine hit. I get the thought in my head that, so what keeps me going in Pokemon is I have the one thought process at the end of the line. The Pokemon hype is going to be bigger tomorrow than it is today. And the reason why I want to keep going after Pokemon, keep collecting, is because I think it's going to keep growing. And I think when it continues to grow, people are going to go back and they're going to look at what is the most rarest, what is the scarcest, what is like most beautiful artwork, what has it all, what can you say Pokemon needs? Rarity, it needs scarcity, it needs beautiful arts, it needs people to talk about it, it needs people to want it, it needs to not be printed to absolute oblivion. What checks all those boxes? And for me, that's what checks all the boxes. So that's why I go after that stuff, because of all those things. Now, at the end of the day, in 10 years from now, is that how the market views that? Probably not. Maybe if I'm right, they will, but that's why I do it. To answer your question, Jake.
Yeah, I think that it's part of collecting. It's part of what drives people to collect anything. Now, there are going to be people there who are just collecting it to look at it and just like the art, or primarily like the art, and don't care as much about the chase. And but there's plenty of options for them, and for me, I like both.
And I'll give you an example. So for you showed that, I think it was 1935 Mickey Mouse PSA. What was the grade for that card, by the way?
Varied grades like 4 through 7. Most of my completed set is 4 through 7.
And I'm gonna guess that those are probably on the high ends of the 7s are probably on the high end for the rarity or for the condition.
Yeah, 7s are really strong grades for them.
So when you look at a card like that and you look at a Mickey Mouse card, which Mickey Mouse is one of the most iconic characters in the history of just the world. When you look at that, I'm sure you're looking at that card and you're breaking it down to what the fundamentals of that card is. And you're like, popularity, strong IP, rarity, scarcity. But
when I look at this card, I think, oh, I remember seeing movies and these things with my dad when I was a kid. I also think, oh, it's cool that very few people in the world have this, and I'm one of the only people who have this. Both, like, people in these hobbies, it's very like, you're a bad person if you care, if you're greedy and want chase and rarity. It's like, no, like I also have very emotional time memories that more people be like, that's good. That's a good way to value things. That's a good way to engage with things. And I guess I just, now the greed part or the money part can be in excess. And that's when you get the scammy, like you're not going to get the scammy manipulative behavior because of the memories with dad, probably. You know, like it's the other stuff that the negative stuff can come in, but it doesn't have to. You can get the dopamine hit, the dopamine rush. You can be in a competitive space with people without letting it get out of hand or get to the point where you mistreat people. So
I think what you said there, which I really took to heart, was the fact that you said it's fun, or maybe you didn't use the word fun, but it's pretty awesome to hold a card that you know nobody else in the world is going to be able to hold, or maybe not a lot of people ever own that card. And for me, I would say that for Pokemon, that is definitely a huge factor in that. There's probably a lot of people out there that would want this card, but will never have the opportunity to own it because I own it. And from a psychological like viewpoint, that definitely matters to me in a way, because the way I look at a lot of cards is like, so I don't want to get into it, but like Raichu first edition and a PSA 10, there's 87 total in the PSA pop. And at one point I owned the 10, I sold it, but it's like a whole video series that I plan on making. I don't own the card anymore. But when I owned that card, I knew that at any point in time, only 87 people could own that card. And it was always in my head. Like it was something I thought about all the time. And there's a lot of cards out there that have that. And I don't know. A little bit of
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's cool when it's, especially when it's something that's so desirable. Like, yeah, there's like one-on-ones out there, and there's so super low numbered stuff. But it's cool to have like for example, the Steph Curry card I have. It's not super duper low numbered. It's numbered to 99, but there's only 99 people in the world that have that card. Like it's pretty cool to be in that kind of club sort of thing. But I like what Jake said too. Is it's the whole kind of bonding experiences, whether it's with a sibling or a parent or whatever. Like I know for me, the summer of LeBron, rookie year before he went to the NBA, we were chasing this one product, Topps Finest, and we were trying to get his rookie redemption card, and we didn't get it. But then some years later, I actually made a trade, and I acquired that card. And it also happens to be worth a pretty good amount of money, but it's cool to have the card that we were chasing for that summer. So many memories from going on vacation and collecting and stuff like that. So it's all about, I think, the money's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. But if that's all you're in it for, like, do something else with your time, man. There's got to be some connection to you actually enjoying it too.
Priorities, priorities. Like
and the dollar amounts we're talking about, it really starts to blur the line of like, we talk about investing a lot, but it's really starts to blur the line of, if you're spending this much money on a card, you better freaking like it. Like, I'm sorry. I'll be the guy to say it. If you're spending that much money, you better really freaking like this card.
Yeah, well, it's pretty funny. I was at
Can we talk about your Serena? Hold on real quick. I've been watching Serena Williams cards because of you. I know we're now really into the niches, but your Serena Williams cards are like employee exclusive cards that you couldn't sell or people didn't want to buy. They always looked at it. But now I looked at most recent sales of Serena Williams, like low pop rookie cards, and you have those cards that are selling for like $100,000.
Yeah, it's pretty silly. So working for Upper Deck, we would get employee exclusive cards like 4 times a year. And one particular time we got the Serena Williams. Part of the reason why it's so sought after is it's the Exquisite Collection brand, and it's got a piece of her, tennis worn, match worn suit, and it's autographed. It's only like 199 of them, and I remember the day that we got those cards in the building, and I was making deals left and right because a lot of people that worked at Upper Deck didn't necessarily collect, and they weren't necessarily into sports. They had a lot of other, roles. So there were a lot of people willing to part ways with them. I actually scooped up 6 of them. I got them all graded. Some are better than others, but I got a couple 9.5s. And yeah, that market has gone absolutely bananas. I remember holding the cards. I bought them for like $150 or $200 a piece, and I sat on them for a long time. And now her market is just going bananas. So
Yeah,
it's pretty
I
cool
saw
being
I saw a
able to do
recent
that.
sale on PWCC. I think they sent out an email about a Serena Williams card sold for like 6 figures.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like the Net Pro, the 96 Net Pro or something. Yeah, it's everywhere. But I mean, she's an absolute animal. She's one of the best athletes on the planet. So pretty wild.
So Jake, some people are asking, so I want to bring it back a little bit, and what people are asking, they want you to show the Mickey Mouse card one more time. I know. I don't want
Some Mickeys. So this is like the number 1 from the set. They all have like a
Pluto
little
on it too.
little
I didn't realize that at first.
Yeah, I mean, part of what's cool. So I also have like the 1940s, and then so different Disney characters were like introduced, and so you can sort of get their like first appearance on cards as they were introduced, which I find really fun. And like there's some characters that I have a really strong attachment with because of my childhood and just going to Disney World with my father and experiences I had. I'm a big Disney fan, but I love the art on these, and they're cute, and I just think they have cute jokes.
So Mickey and Pluto again, yeah.
Yeah.
So
what's the back look like? I'm sorry. What's the back look? Oh,
they look like, so all the Gum Ink, which is a famous company.
Yep.
They all look like this. It's the same with the Superman Hearts of War, which is one like PSA's best set of the year, I think, last year. I have some of those cards around too I can show, but
is that the Superman ones are 1936 though, right?
The Superman ones are 1940.
Oh,
yeah, they're the first ones.
Is there not a 1936?
Okay. Of what brand that you're thinking of? Yeah,
I couldn't tell you the card brand. I just thought that there was Superman trading cards from 1936. I know Superman #1 was 1934, Action Comics #1, but I thought there was a Superman trading card from 1936. It might be 1940. I could be wrong.
So there's one single card that I forget what it's at a year for. It's not a complete set. There's like one single card that's out there that could be earlier that maybe you're thinking of. I'm not sure if that's from 1936, but this is like the first Superman set.
Okay.
I could look it up actually real fast while you guys talk.
I could be wrong. This is something I
do want to look up this one card because I'm interested to see. Maybe that's what you're thinking of, and I could show it.
Now, so Jay, for you, for sports cards, obviously you're into more what I would call modern. So for modern, I mean, you talk about Stephen Curry, stuff like that. So I would say for sports cards, what do you guys consider modern? Is it 2010 to present?
Honestly, like it depends who you ask. It's funny. I heard a LeBron rookie get mentioned in like, vintage conversation. I'm thinking to myself, dude's still playing. Like, how is it vintage? This is my childhood. Are we really that old? So in my opinion, I think you could start to take a look at when autographs, memorabilia got introduced, and start to say that's kind of a good time frame to say that's what started the modern era of trading cards. So 2000s, early 2000s.
Okay.
I'd say till now, but yeah, like I said, it's pretty soon that early 2000s.
How do you look at junk wax era? So like 80s, 90s. Do you consider that modern, or is that just
No, that's I
junk wax?
don't consider that to be modern. Well, I guess yeah, it's not vintage. It's kind of vintage, medium vintage. No, I would group that in with the vintage at this point, but it kind of unfortunately has that stigma of the junk wax. So there's a good time frame that'll just stay in that with that designation.
I'm trying to look if there's any questions from the chat. Now's the time to ask them. Jake, are you having any luck with the? No, I could.
Finding it. Not definitely not 1936, because I looked up there. But there's a specific card I'm thinking of that you might be thinking of, which is not the gumming set that I don't believe it was earlier. I think it was the same year, if my recollection, but it's not really a card. It's like, so it doesn't really count. Yeah, whatever.
Okay. I just learned something new.
Yeah, but the number one in that set is quite a valuable card. And
is that him stopping a train?
He does that in the set. The number one isn't that. So he's in every single card in the set doing like saving something. I have the whole set somewhere.
You have a whole set? Wow.
I do, yeah. Yeah, it's one of my favorite sets in the entire card hobby. I'm obsessed with them. I think that to me, it's stunning, like how much the original comics go for versus these. But given that these were pretty rare, really hard to find. I've never even seen a pack or heard of anyone who's had a pack of them. Versus like the 1938 Horrors of Wars and even these Disney cards where I see some packs that seem to be the Horrors of War was like very mass printed. It was the most mass printed set ever at the time. Extremely popular, circulated all over the world. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where they are. I don't know. My room is an unbelievable mess.
So Jay, I'm gonna ask you. So what do you think about like vintage sports cards? And I'll be right
back. So I was a proponent of vintage sports cards in terms of where that market was going. I think when this kind of market boomed, everyone was focusing on modern stuff and obviously autographs and high-end rookies and memorabilia cards. But I was trying to tell people like that the whole kickback, like vintage, is going to kick back really strong. I just think I think so much of it has to do with the people that have kind of reintroduced themselves into the hobby in the past 3 years, I'll say. We're diving into modern stuff, and for the most part, and now are starting to go back and say, oh, this vintage stuff, or starting to get into the card game, and then looking back at the roots of it, and starting to see like, oh, before this, first round or first overall pick of the football draft is before his 6-figure card was 6 figures. There was like a Ty Cobb and Mickey Mantles, like all these sports figures and major iconic cards in the vintage market are starting to get some notice from that modern market. So I knew there was going to be a resurgence there. And I mean, prices are at their all-time high, but I think it's been a pretty good, for quite some time, it's been a pretty good back and forth of the rise in those. You see the modern day go high, slow down as the vintage, kind of paces up and passes it and then slows down for the modern. So, it's just cyclical. It all bounces off of each other.
Yeah. So I want to kind of bring it back to you, Jake. So you mentioned the Superman card. So obviously when you think of comic books, Superman's got to be number one. And you're talking about one of the earliest, call it comic books trading cards. Now, Marvel's seen a pretty drastic rise in the last 2 years. Now, Marvel cards are not all created equal. I would say that there is a drastic difference in it. Now, how are you able to navigate that market? So you got like X-Men, Marvel in general, Avengers cards, and JT said he worked on the Marvel Avengers line at Upper Deck. So how are you able to navigate like the Marvel universe for trading cards? Because they're definitely not all created equal, but even some of the heavily produced, like what was it, Marvel Masterpieces 94, I think there was 250,000 booster boxes printed. I think everyone is like individually numbered. Like that's a lot. But have you had trouble navigating that market, or how do you differentiate, like, because even you can go back and think about like some real early X-Men stuff, some real early like Marvel stuff trading card wise that go past Marvel Series 1, because I think like a lot of people think about early 90s, they think of like Marvel Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, Series 4, but there's some stuff that goes a little bit earlier than that. How do you navigate that market?
So the originals are from 1966, the Don Russ set. That has not gone up nearly as much as like the PMGs, which have been the biggest movers for sure. Nothing's gone up like the precious metal gems from my knowledge. We might have like Swami in the chat or something. There's some people who are a lot deeper than I am who know it a lot, more broader. Nick, I know, got really deep into it too. Retrospects. But Marvel's not, I like Marvel, but I don't love Marvel. So it's not something that for the price point. So I did go after some of the Donruss stuff, and I did buy a bunch of the like 90s stuff, happened to before it ballooned, and then I sold a bunch of it. I kind of went through the stuff like the Impel 90s stuff, the set that everyone was kind of one of the first things that moved a lot. I think it was like, it's a guy's chat, like Northeast Ohio or something, trading card. I forget the guy's name. He, was talking about them. Then it really moved into precious metal gems. I don't own any precious metal gems. I didn't own any, so I completely missed. That was the one big area of gains that I dropped the ball on, or completely missed, or just underestimated. I'm pretty stunned at the growth on those and why that exactly happened. Combination of like a really hardcore fan base who really loves them, definitely, but also like a lot of influencers who kind of got into the space, and a lot of people from the sports card community who moved the prices up like really radically. Those have come back a lot. And then you have all these beautiful sets. I mean, there's lots and lots of sets, as you were saying. Pokenomics, like there are lots of beautiful sets. Some that I like more than others aesthetically. I have binders of a lot of the sets, but I haven't gone like heavy into getting graded cards of a lot of the sets because I'm not that into it, and I more just wanted like a complete bind. I mean, I'm an obsessive collector, as everyone knows. So like I do have like a binder set of most of those sets at this point, but I didn't get like multiples and doubles, and I didn't speculate on any of it because it's just not I don't feel like I have an instinct for that market, and I speculate on things that I'm really obsessive about, and I like dig really deep in, and I have like a pretty good surface knowledge and surface area. I also have some of like the WotC. I have a WotC box of Marvel from the 90s in the back. There's a lot of Marvel product.
What Wizard of the Coast set did they make for Marvel? I don't even know.
Yeah, I have it back there. I don't know too much about it. I know what the cards look like. I don't think too many people are into it.
So I know from when I was at Upper Deck, we had the Marvel license, obviously, and quite a few product lines. If you're talking about like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and all their movies, the thing with all of that is, we would come out with products for each. I'm not every single movie, but for a good amount of the movies, Ant-Man, the Avengers, all all different kinds. I'm trying to think. Deadpool had one, but there was a variety of sets. And
oh, I'm sorry. What's the diamond set called that they're doing that's popular now?
Black Diamond.
Black Diamond. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're good. And I think one of the things that made some of those sets hit or miss was it was tied to movie assets. So we had actors and actresses and screen worn materials in some cases, but it wasn't for every movie. So like we had a Spider-Man Far From Home or Homecoming, or I forget, it might have been Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming. And you could hit Tom Holland autos in there, and Tom Holland autos were going for crazy money. But then, we would hit a license where those assets weren't as forthcoming, and we didn't have screen used materials. We weren't getting the same autograph quality. So it became a balancing act, and I think you did see some products hit way stronger. In terms of like all of the comic book stuff and those type of characters, the PMGs, they raged. That the jambalayas, I think it was just anything that had strong branding already established in the sports world. And then once that subject matter hit, collectors who were looking for any other stream other than sports, that's the stuff, and those are the inserts they immediately gravitated to and said, these are the ones that have value. I remember actually my first year at Upper Deck, I had a whole set of the PMGs in front of me. Like they were in a 5,000 count box, and I was like flipping through them and pricing them out, and most of them $3-4, and now to see the prices on some of them, it's wild. It's awesome though. It's great to see people, make the jump from the comic book world to the trading card world. And there's a lot of parallels in that, and I think it comes through in some of those sets.
What are the what are the chase cards called in the Black Diamond? The ones with the gems or whatever?
So those are just called diamond relic cards. And there's a few different kinds. There's like single relic, double relic, triple, quad relics, and then there's I think there's one tied to like the Infinity Stones, and it has all the different color gems in it. Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, there's a bunch.
I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, it's funny. I am not a big fan. It's an interesting conversation. I don't know if you want to take it this way, Pokenomics, but I am not a big fan of autographs on these types of things. And it's this weird sort of thing of like, I really like the characters, not so much the act. I'm not a huge fan of the actors particularly. And I'm more interested in like who designed the story and the character arc, or when it's animated, did the animation, than I am the person acting in it. And I'm interested sort of like how other people feel about that.
Does it matter if it's, like a sticker autograph or on card autograph, or it doesn't matter either way to you? Like autograph is
on card, we could say is cooler because at least the person was actually there to sign it. But as far as just like that part, putting that aside, I value them way lower. Like to me, like I don't really care that much about Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and on the Star Wars stuff. People are paying like $10,000.
Yeah.
Like, these autographs, and it's like, Carrie Fisher passed away, so maybe that can make, but like, it's a little bit strange to me, but it very much seems to come from the sports world, right? Because they're built the exact same way as sports cards. They're built,
right,
they look the same. They have the, maybe a patch, a relic, and then an autograph on it, or some just have the autograph, some just have the relic. Most, I think, just are that way.
So for me, Jake, where it boils down to is like that, because it's a movie scene most of the time, or it's an actual person. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, when they take away like the artistic ability of like Pokemon, where every card is hand drawn, there is no Pokemon in real life. Nobody snapped a photo. Nobody took a clip from some famous movie, you know, like whether it's episode 4 or 5 or 6, Return of the Jedi, and they clip that scene. I think because it's that's all that is, right? It's just a clip of a scene of a movie at some point. So to add the autograph to it definitely brings a little bit more to it, where in a lot of the other TCGs that I look at is because it has that hand-drawn artistic ability to it. Maybe that's why people gravitate towards the signatures, but that's a good question though. Like, and the thought you brought up and the reason why you don't really care for them, like, I think it's extremely valid though.
Like,
Yeah. So,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
no, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, like, when I'm a fan of the Beatles, I'm a fan of Jason Tatum. I'm a fan of those people. I'm not a fan of Mark Hamill. I'm a fan of Han Solo. So it feels, it just, and this is just one man's
Right.
opinion. I'm telling no one out there to feel this way. It's literally one man's opinion, just sharing. It doesn't hit with me the same way. And yet for some people it seems to, which I love. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. I just think, thought I'd throw that out there for me personally.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I think that's what's good about how those products were and especially from what I recall at Upper Deck, is like when you look to the sets, we were just talking about the PMGs. When you look to that set and you wonder, well, how come there's so much value there? How did it drive so high? That's the artwork. That has nothing to do with the cinematic universe. That's all the artwork and the comic book related stuff. And then you take a look at some of the products that were geared towards movie releases and you say, okay, this is where the autographs become important and who the actors are became important and added some extra value. Like, yeah, Iron Man is cool, but if you look at like just a given cardboard Iron Man card versus the Iron Man PMG, the Iron Man PMG with the original artwork is going to be big money. But there's also the people that are like, I like Iron Man, but I like Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man. That autograph is going to be a multiple $1,000 autograph. So it also, that goes to where you're going to spend your money on which type of release. Are you going to go for your autographs and memorabilia and cinematic situation, or are you going to stick with your print? And I think there's been a lot of cool chase there. Like I said, the comic cuts, we started going out and getting some pretty expensive, like first edition comic books, first appearance of, and taking out key panels and cutting out key panels of these comics and inserting them in cards. So there's a lot of cool stuff that has come from that.
So we got 2 good questions I want to answer. The first one is Dark Lava Lizard said, all right, this is going to be kind of embarrassing, but for a while, Jake was asking questions to John. And I swear to God, I thought he was asking me questions. And I'm definitely realizing your name is John on the screen. So I was definitely answering Jake at a certain point in this video where I was directly answering him. And I was like, stop saying my real name. So I got to go back. I'm sorry if I like totally stole some of JT. So I know him as JT. I don't know him as John. But I definitely stole some of his questions earlier. So big apologies. But so, and I didn't realize it till I like read this question. He said, can John talk about how much UD product or pro types end up walking out of the building versus actually ending up in the shredder? And once I read that question, I realized there was no way I could answer that question and that he was talking to you. So sorry, JT. Like, that's how I know you. So that's how I think of you.
No problem at all.
But I was definitely answering Jake's questions to John at one point in this live, and big apologies.
I don't think it happened. It happened. I didn't even notice it, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after he answers that, there's another good question from John Doe. So I'm going to let Jay answer that question, but afterwards, we got a question about Japanese print quality versus English print quality. And because or JT was also at Upper Deck print facilities, I'd be extremely interested to wonder, why is print quality so different in different printing facilities? But I'll let you answer the first question. I think you're frozen. Is he frozen on your screen, Jake?
Yeah, he is.
So first on the whole prototypes and whether, what's up?
So you were frozen for a second.
Oh, okay.
No.
So to address the whole issue or the question about prototypes or whether or not stuff leaves Upper Deck, it's not really set up for that to be possible. Our creative department is on, in California, or the creative department is in California, and then the operations department is on the other opposite side of the country. And then there's printing facilities in the middle. So it's a little difficult to try to do any of that stuff, and the printing securities are pretty secure. There's been some rare cases of things that are out of the norm that shouldn't have got out that did, but it's pretty easily identifiable because there is very few people that could actually do something like that. So it doesn't really happen as often as you think. More of the kind of fraudulent activity happens after the fact, once a product's out, or if you try to work with customer service and keep something that you should have sent in or stuff like that. And then as far as the printing quality, I did see a significant shift in that recently. So most of the sports trading card companies print out of similar facilities. They all share a couple facilities in the United States. And for a while, for a long time, Panini has also printed in Europe, specifically Italy. And part of the issue with that, when you distribute in the United States, is that you have to, if you print in Europe, you're shipping literally overseas to then, kind of cut your product, package it, and distribute it. So it's a lot could go wrong with that. And then I also noticed, like, recently, one of the major, I'm not going to say who it is, but one of the major trading card companies shifted to using an Italian vendor for their printing. And you could definitely see some subtle things in the quality of their product that have changes, down to even like the serial numbering doesn't look the same as it used to. So it's just kind of ebbs and flows in the market. The issue is you're gonna need more printers. It can't be just the same 2, 3, 4 printers in the United States, because they're packed to the gills. They're at full capacity. Part of the reason why you're seeing so many product delays. So some of this printing does need to be outsourced to other facilities, and it's just, unfortunately, it's just a matter of those facilities, becoming accustomed to printing cards and, running into those little tiny issues that can make or break a card, and knowing how to fix them. The major ones in the United States have been doing it since the 90s. Some other facilities still have to get in touch with some of those standards,
So for everybody out there, so I appreciate both Jake and JT coming on. It's getting late here on the East Coast. Appreciate both you guys joining. This is a great conversation. It's definitely very fun for me. And not everybody's going to love this one. It's not a 100% Pokemon conversation, but I do love to have the more broader conversation, sports cards, TCGs, market in general. I think this is important because as this channel continues to progress, as the hobby continues to progress, and all the things that and all the nuances that are, lumped into that, I think it's important to understand everything. And when you talk about everything, like Jake was mentioning earlier, talking about history of stuff, looking at other products, how they've performed in the past, I think it's so valuable. And there's so many little nuances in the trading card hobby that you need to just grab onto and understand. And in order to be well-rounded, you need to know about everything. And to be honest, it's impossible to know about everything. But with that said, for everybody out there watching this live, I want to tell you a couple things. One, in the description below, there is the first live I had with JT on my channel. If you're curious about his backstory, if you want to hear a little bit more about him at Upper Deck, I highly recommend you watching that live. There's also a link to Jake's channel. I would say that 100% of you guys are already subscribed to Jake, but in the very minute possibility you are not, definitely recommend you subscribe to Jake. But with that said, if you guys have any close-in thoughts, I want to just say, first of all, thank you, Jake, for joining the channel. JT, thank you again for joining. You guys are both awesome. But if you guys have any parting words.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Always good conversation. Jake, man, maybe I'll see you at the National.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice meeting you. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I love talking cards, and it's fun. I would like to talk more about all sorts of other TCGs and CCGs and cards, and I mean, the fact that you had 40 to 50 people the entire time on your Pokemon channel, like where I feel like most people are not interested in this stuff, I'm impressed. Maybe I could talk a little bit more about this stuff too, but I thought about starting a podcast actually a while back with some people from different card communities, with the idea of just starting a new channel or a new thing where we could sort of talk about everything and other sort of stuff. Because so many people in the Pokemon space, they just want to hear about Pokemon. They hate, any of the talking about other stuff. But it's been a pleasure hanging out, and thank you to people in the chat for asking questions and hanging out with us.
Yep. And for everybody else out there, thank you guys for joining this conversation, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.